Chapter 79. At noon, the scorching sun hung high in the sky. In a manor on the outskirts of the capital city of 66 Amaterasu, a group of black-clothed men were swarming into the manor. They killed anyone they saw and burned down every house they saw. From the signboard at the entrance, one could vaguely make out the word "Yi." I say, why are they dressed in black in broad daylight? Gunan stood outside the manor and asked Lu Zhanyu, who was beside him, in confusion. Lan Marigold's face was a little dark as she replied, "Shouldn't you be the one asking that? Who would come here to exterminate an entire family in the middle of the day?" "So what if it's in the middle of the day?" Gunan shrugged. "When it comes to exterminating an entire family, of course they have to make sure that not a single chicken is spared. What if they escape at night?" As he spoke, a young man was running out of the manor in a panic. There were a few black-clothed men chasing after him. When the young man saw that Gunan and his companion were not dressed in black, he did not care and hurriedly shouted, "Sir, save me, sir." Gunan waved his hand and gestured for the people behind him to go back. He then waved at the young man and said, "You come here." When the young man turned around, he happened to see the black-clothed men bowing and leaving. He panicked even more, but he did not dare to pretend that he did not hear them. He could only bite the bullet and walk over. "Sir, do you have any instructions?" Before he could finish his sentence, Gunan took out a golden eagle out of nowhere. He wiped his right hand on the blood-red pupil, and a few pink crystals appeared. He stuffed them into the young man's mouth. Ugh! The young man, who was forced to swallow the pink crystals, quickly became dazed. He swayed on the spot and then sat on the ground. Following that, he ran for a while and punched at the ancient tree. Then, he simply rushed back to the manor. In the end, he was beheaded by a passing black-clothed man. As expected, it has strong hallucinogenic properties. Gunan nodded lightly. He had not fed something like Max to Lin Yunyun before. In the end, it was still a little strange. He planned to first do some small experiments to study the pattern. Lan Marigold looked at the golden eagle in Gunan's hand and asked curiously, "I heard that Max is made from fresh blood. Is that true? There's such a thing?" Gunan looked down at the golden eagle. Thinking about it, it wasn't impossible. He found that crystals were forming in the left eye of the golden eagle. It was after the golden eagle had absorbed enough blood, and this bloody eye could easily make people think of blood. Yeah, I also heard from some elders that Max was later banned, not only because of the side effects of the drug, but also because the production method was too cruel. Gunan frowned slightly, feeling a little puzzled. Using fresh blood as raw material was not cruel at all. Not to mention that it was not a big deal for ordinary people to bleed a little. Moreover, wasn't there also the blood of beasts? This Max's I might have other uses that he didn't know. The two of them stood for a while, and the shouting in the manor gradually subsided. A man in black walked quickly and reported to the two of them. There are a total of 352 people in the Yi Manor. Currently, except for a few servants who went out to buy, the rest have all been killed. "Sir, please instruct us." Gunan nodded. "The few fish that escaped the net must also be found and killed. We can't let the whole family die on the road to hell." Yes, Gunan and Lan Marigold were now in the manor of Yi Qinglan's family. Since the previous battle, Gunan was angry that he was injured by Hu Wei, and he also took his anger out on Yi Qinglan. So he simply ran over to search and destroy the family. Well, the key reason was that Hu Wei had no other family members. She only had a younger brother since she was young, which was why she hated Gunan so much after Hu Daobin died. As for her friends, most of them were in the Red Carp. Her only teacher was Lu Yiming, and he had already severed all ties with her. Gunan had no choice but to vent his anger on the Yi clan. Seeing that the matter was almost settled, Lan Marigold spoke again. "I mentioned previously that I will help you find a small reincarnation organization to join. I have already contacted them, and they intend to send someone over to talk to you face to face." This wasn't considered strange. After all, Gunan was already a member of the Star's ranking and had a reputation in the entire Star domain. Be it out of respect or for the safety of their own organization, it was only right for them to come over. "Oh." Gunan looked at her strangely. "I thought you would take this opportunity to join." I'm different from you. Land Marigold rolled her eyes and said, I reincarnated to seek resources and also to obtain some personal goods. Only a large organization like the Star Domain Gate is suitable for me. Gunan thought about it, and it was indeed as she said. If he wasn't able to accept instance dungeon missions, he probably wouldn't have much interest in the reincarnation organization. After all, to an individual, as long as he completed the missions and obtained the rewards, he wouldn't have any intention to worry about the organization. When will they arrive? I am not sure yet. They are also coming from the 6-star region, and the time of the Star Domain jump is uncertain. Land Marigold shrugged her shoulders. Gunan then recalled that the Star Domain had something called the Star Domain jump. The Star Domain's 9 major star domains weren't artificially divided, and it wasn't a concept of administrative regions either. It was a true domain. Between domains, one had to use the method of space jump, and it was impossible to directly travel between domains. During the process of space jump, the time would be within a rough range, and it was hard to determine the exact time. For example, the other branch of Lu's family, which was coming to the 66 Amaterasu for war, was also from the 6-star region. Hence, the time of arrival was also uncertain, and it was only known that it would be within the next 2 weeks. For the time being, this matter could only wait, and Gunan wasn't in a hurry. He hadn't finished his chain of events yet. The next step was to test the use of Max, and try to let Lin Yinyin come into contact with Max to see if she could trigger the next evil event. Right. How's the situation in the immortal demon world? Gunan suddenly thought of this matter. Currently, the flow of time in the immortal demon world was 10 times faster than in the Star Domain. Almost every few days here, there would be a huge change. The last report I received was that the war has already begun. Land Marigold said casually, As you wish, we sent a lot of technology and equipment to Blue Dragon Hall. Now, at least they have the ability to fight back. That's good. Gunan's eyes were filled with anticipation. After 20 years of evolution in the immortal demon world, even though there were pitifully few transcendents, the foundation was still there. Moreover, they had the advantage in numbers. As long as care for one's family couldn't find suitable natives to support them, they might be able to slowly turn the situation around. Now that they had Land Marigold to help make up for the difference in hardware, at least they wouldn't be beaten to the ground at the start of the war. When Land Marigold saw Gunan's expression, she couldn't help but ask curiously, You've tried so hard to start a war. What are you trying to do? She really didn't understand. Whether Gunan wanted resources or to vent his anger, it didn't seem like he should have used this kind of method. Of course, she didn't know that Gunan was cultivating that world as a spare tire for his divine kingdom. Of course, he was thinking of ways to improve the power level of the people there. No matter how powerful a master is, he can't cultivate more powerful people than war. Gunan smiled at her. Chapter 80. A grand duel had ended in a strange way. Thanks to Tian Tianrong's vigorous publicity, Gunan's infamy had gone up another level. His grudge with Hu Wei was just a small matter. Instead, it was Yi Qinglan's death and the extermination of the entire Yi clan that shocked many people. Compared to the battle record of killing the Bittersword Saint, his previous feat of eliminating the 7-star squad was negligible. He was a star's ranker, a true veteran Eternal Domain realm, and a master swordsman. The 7-star squad was also known as an elite squad that specialized in killing Eternal Domain realm experts, but they were dealing with star beasts. How could their foresight and methods be compared to the human race? In the endless void, a starship was traveling slowly. It was in a very strange state. From the outside, it seemed to be fast and slow at times. Sometimes, even the body of the ship would be blurred. If there was someone knowledgeable here, they would definitely understand that this starship was in the midst of a star field jump. Inside the starship, an elder was holding a stack of information and reading it attentively. The first sentence of the information was impressively written. The target killed the Bittersword Saint, Yi Qinglan, at 66 Amaterasu. A young lady at the side whispered, Elder, this Gunan is too vicious and merciless. If we accept him into the organization and he has the intention to seize power, The consequences will be unimaginable. As soon as she finished speaking, the man at the side spoke. Wei Ro, don't be an alarmist. It is that Yi Qinglan who openly challenged Mr. Gu. Is he going to stand there and let him kill him? Wei Ro immediately retorted. Since it is a duel, he naturally has to stop. Why does he want to kill him? The man sneered in disdain and didn't even bother to speak. He turned to look at the elder. Elder Qin, you make the decision. The man smiled. If you want to go home, it's not too late to ask the captain to turn around. But I have to remind you, elder, that person's pigeon is not to be let off easily. Wei Ro's face changed slightly when she heard the man's last sentence. She said in a deep voice, Li Leo, are you saying that our white mist is afraid of him alone? Li Leo shrugged and didn't say anything, but his meaning was clear. Elder Qin waved his hand and said, all right, no matter how things develop, since I promised that person, I have to at least meet him. Wei Ro saw that she couldn't influence the elder's decision, so she could only angrily stomp her feet and turn around to leave. Seeing this, Elder Qin could only shake his head slightly. I heard that Old Wei and Yi Qinglan are close friends. It seems that the rumors are true. Leo, be prepared. Don't let her do anything out of line. Yes, elder. Li Leo bowed in response, but there was a strange smile in his eyes. Putting aside the conversation in the endless void, Gunan was still doing his own things on 66 Amaterasu. He spent a few days and finally studied the nature of Max. This golden eagle was indeed called Max. Its origin was hard to verify, but the text on its body was at least 3,000 years old. And the ability of Max's eye to produce drugs didn't seem that simple. The blood of many races could produce drugs that would make people excited, but the effects were specific. Human blood was extremely effective on humans, but pig blood was much less effective when used on humans, and vice versa. In addition, Max's eye seemed to be a bottomless pit. Even after pouring the blood of hundreds of people, it didn't show any signs of being full. Don't ask Gunan how he knew. But these were all minor details. What really concerned Gunan was the effect of the drug Max walking slowly into the laboratory that was completely white. Gunan came to a one-way glass. Lin Yunyun was isolated inside. Lin Yunyun wasn't in a good state at the moment. Her hands and feet were hung with heavy chains, and her hair was disheveled. The isolation room seemed very messy. How's the situation today? Gunan asked. According to the plan, the target has ingested 5 units of Max. There are no abnormalities for the time being. A researcher walked to Gunan and reported softly. Gunan nodded and said, continue to observe. Yes. Gunan took one last look at Lin Yunyun, then turned around and left. The isolation glass couldn't block his shadow power, so he could easily see Lin Yunyun's current state. She will reach the critical point of becoming a transcendent in about 10 days. Gunan made an accurate judgment. Ever since he fed Max to Lin Yunyun, the situation had become difficult to deal with. The effects of Max had long been tested. The positive effect was to make people excited and resolve some of the chaotic internal energy, but the side effect was that it had a strong hallucinogenic effect. The two effects on Lin Yunyun were like heaven and earth. Lin Yunyun's internal energy was extremely complicated, and it was all accumulated in her body. She could only rely on herself to resolve it bit by bit. But the appearance of Max became an opportunity. Taking Max could actually help her resolve her internal energy and improve her cultivation in disguise. Max's hallucinogenic effect seemed to be especially effective on Lin Yunyun. Every time she took Max, her mind would be in a chaotic state. Sometimes she would fall asleep immediately, and sometimes she would run out and kill. Because of this, Gunan had to lock her up like an animal and feed her a certain amount of Max every day. He had a premonition that the next step would be for Lin Yunyun to make a breakthrough in her cultivation. 2 days later, Lu's family came to invite Gunan because the Lu's family branch in the 6-star region had finally arrived. When Gunan arrived, Lu Yiming and Su Yuanjun were already there, as well as Guan Shanxue from the Yinyang Tower, whom Gunan had met before. Apart from these three, there was also a man and a woman that Gunan had never seen before. The man had blue hair and the cold expression. He didn't seem to be talkative. The woman, on the other hand, was more lively. When she saw Gunan, she looked at him curiously. When Gunan saw the two, he frowned slightly. This was because the way they dressed was very special. They both wore azure robes with a mysterious flower-shaped pattern embroidered on their chests. I am afraid that there are only a few people present who can recognize this pattern, even Lu Yiming and Su Yuanjun. When Lu Yiming saw Gunan, he took the initiative to introduce him. Guan Shanxue from the Yinyang Tower. You must already know Gunan. Lu Yiming pointed to the three people next to him. These two are Lan Ta and his sister, Lan Si. Then, he introduced Gunan, and they nodded to each other in greeting. They were acquainted. During this process, Gunan's eyes seemed to inadvertently sweep over them, confirming the pattern on their chests. As expected. Chapter 81. When Gunan first returned to the Langya world, he had met a blood god's messenger. After that, Gunan confirmed that this world was indeed related to the game in his previous life. Not only did the power systems correspond, but even the gods in the game would appear directly. But for a long time, there had been no trace of the gods until today. Different from a low-level god like the blood god, the god of flowers was a level 10 super god, only one step away from the main god level. The god's messengers were not that simple. Gunan pretended not to know the two and sat calmly in his seat, but he had a panoramic view of what was going on. As the head of the family, Lu Yiming would not intervene in the battle between the two branches of the Lu family. It was the same for the other side. It was a competition of connections and the level of training of the younger generation. Each side would send 5 people to compete in 5 rounds. It was a best-of-5 system. Su Yuanjun and Lu Yiming were good friends. Su Yuanjun's spatial ability was also very special, so it was natural that he would participate in this battle. As for the god of flowers, it was most likely an unexpected variable. Originally, Luli would definitely appear in such a situation, but this time, Lu Yiming did not let him participate. The reason was that he did not want him to meet Gunan face to face. On the other hand, it was because there were enough people now. This time, Lu Yiming invited them to confirm the time of the competition with them in person. He also wanted to thank them for their help. Gunan did not feel anything about it. He only came to help because of the deal with Land Marigold. After they left one after another, Gunan deliberately slowed down and returned. He found Lu Yiming and asked, "Elder Lu, who are those 2 people?" Lu Yiming knew that he was asking about the Lan siblings. After all, those 2 people were indeed a bit mysterious. I don't know their specific background. A junior in the family accidentally saved them, so they agreed to help. How's his strength? Upon hearing this question, Lu Yiming replied with a serious expression, "They are at least at the subtlety realm. That Lan Ta might already be at the eternal domain realm." Gunan rubbed his chin. It was just as he thought. These were 2 third-rank divine envoys, but what was their purpose for coming here? On top of that, for 2 people with such strength to be saved by a junior from the Lu family, if it wasn't intentional, it must have been due to some other reason that they had temporarily lost their strength. Serious injury? Seal? Lacking divine power when he first came to this world? Lu Yiming didn't know that Gunan had so many thoughts running through his mind in an instant. He only smiled and said, "No matter where those 2 are from, they're still related to my Lu family. Mr. Gu, you can rest assured." Gunan nodded with a faint smile, and then casually found an excuse before bidding his farewell and leaving. It would be a lie to say that he wasn't curious about the divine envoys, but he wasn't in a hurry to approach them. After all, his own strength was fundamental. He wasn't worried about being discovered as an evil god. Evil gods were a very special kind of existence. Apart from the strangeness of the core god nation after the first class change, they were usually no different from ordinary people. Even the gods themselves couldn't tell. At the same time, the siblings Lan Ta and Lan Si were talking in their room. "Brother, the people here are so weak. Even third-rank cultivators are rare." Lan Si sat on the bed, kicked off the high heels she was wearing, and giggled. Lan Ta was still expressionless. "Don't underestimate them. This is just one of the worlds in the heavens, but there are 4th rank and 5th rank experts here. Remember to hide our identities." "I know. Lan Si curled her lips, obviously still somewhat dissatisfied. She muttered, "The heavens are so chaotic. Who would have the time to care about us? Just in case." Lan Ta glared at her. "After the matter with the Liu family is settled, we'll repay little Liu for saving our lives. Then we'll set off to find the Clearwater Stone." Another few days passed, and Lin Yunyun's cultivation was steadily improving. She was already close to innate level 5, and the day of the competition with the Liu family had finally arrived. Under the guidance of the Liu family, Gunan arrived at a small hidden arena. The rest of the people were already waiting. Two sides stood with a clear distinction. One side was naturally led by Liu Yiming and Liu family, while the other side was led by a middle-aged woman. "I didn't expect you to be leading the team this year, little seven." Liu Yiming was obviously a little surprised. He had never seen the people on that side before. "That old woman Liu Fong really can't walk anymore?" The middle-aged woman called Little Seven replied in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. "Mother is in the central galaxy, so she couldn't come at the last minute. Please forgive her, ninth uncle." Both the question and the answer were a little showy. One was showing off, and the other was showing off, so it was Liu Yiming who was at a disadvantage. However, Liu Yiming was thick-skinned, so he didn't mind. He said casually, "Then let's begin. We'll follow the rules from last year." After saying that, he turned around and said, "Old Su, you're going first." "Sure." Su Yuanjun didn't say much and agreed right away. Before the battle, neither side knew who the other side would send out, so they took turns to send out their opponents. Gunan stood in the crowd and glanced at the people on that side. Lan Marigold stood beside him and said in a low voice, "They know you're in 66 Amaterasu, so the old man will definitely send you out later. There's someone on the other side who's very suitable to be your opponent." Oh, Gunan was a little curious. He wasn't familiar with the elites in the astral realm, so it was always good to know his opponent in advance. "Do you see that big guy?" Lan Marigold pointed to the other side and said, "He's a famous stars ranking expert. His title is the Storm Saber Wielder, Feng Zhuotang." Gunan rubbed his chin and didn't say anything. He just stared at the other side. He had already put on the observer's eyepiece and was carefully analyzing every flaw of his opponent. He actually understood why this Feng Zhuotang was suitable to be his opponent. After the battle with Yi Qinglan, everyone knew that his defense and recovery abilities were outstanding, and he had the ability to resist domain attacks. Hence, he wasn't afraid of an opponent who relied on frequent attacks to win. If Yi Qinglan was able to gather his 39,000 swords, Gunan probably wouldn't dare to take it head-on. After knowing the possible opponents, Gunan decided to withdraw his gaze. Anyway, the others didn't matter to him. But right at this moment, he noticed an unexpected person in the crowd of Liu's family. It was a woman who contributed a dungeon challenge to him a long time ago, giving him a bunch of points and sin points. Qin Xuanji. Back when Gunan ascended to the astral realm and was on the starship, he met her and even activated the dungeon challenge. Later on, they were kidnapped to the Ming Lu, and the two of them made a deal. Gunan helped her escape from the Ming Lu, and she taught Gunan the method to become a solitary reincarnator. Chapter 82. The battle between the two branches of the Liu family was not as tense as one would imagine. After all, this happened every few years. With both sides winning and losing, both sides appeared calm. The first expert sent out was a warrior who used a short knife. He was only in the nuance realm, so it was obvious that they were counting on winning from the start. Su Yuanjun was not famous, but he had participated in the battle between the two families in the past. The middle-aged woman knew what he was capable of, so she decided to give him a free fight. Sure enough, the warrior could not even touch the corner of Su Yuanjun's clothes. The old man casually slapped him on the shoulder, and he decisively surrendered. For the second round, the middle-aged woman sent out Qin Xuanji. She wore a strange red dress that looked like a long windbreaker, but the style was very strange. At this time, Qin Xuanji had reached the transcendent level. Her speed was not as fast as Gunan's, but it was already very fast among normal cultivators. On the other side, Liu Yiming sent out the younger sister of the Lan siblings, Lan Si. Lan Si skipped over and pursed her lips into a smile. "Sister, you have to be careful. I won't be lenient." Qin Xuanji was clearly not the kind of person to waste words. She said directly, "Let's begin." Lan Si's mouth flattened, and he casually pointed a finger, and a strange blue light directly collided in front of him. Qin Xuanji cautiously tried to avoid it, but the blue light seemed to have eyes of its own. It made a turn and stuck to her, colliding with her arm. It was only when the blue light touched her that Qin Xuanji realized what it was. It was actually water. The energy-formed water column, in a strange way, formed this kind of attack. Its own impact and high-energy state were not weak. It was just that it would turn into water after the attack. Most of the people watching from below frowned, puzzled by Lan Si's move. Water was water, and energy was energy. How could they be converted? Could it be that this person's supernatural power was special? Only Gu Nin had expected this. Despite the artistic name of the god of flowers, she was essentially a water god. In her early years, she had been a subordinate god of an ancient water god. Later on, she walked a new path on her own. As an experienced player, Gu Nin was well aware of the abilities of the Blossom Oracle. This skill was known as high-pressure water gun, or shoot your face by the players. It was the basic ability of the Blossom Oracle. In other words, it was a normal slash. The strength of this move was not high, but if one underestimated it because of this, one would suffer greatly. Qin Xuanji felt that the water gun didn't have much power, so she simply didn't dodge the subsequent water gun shots. She took them head-on and rushed in front of Lan Si. She was an expert in close combat, and Lan Si clearly wasn't that type of player. Everyone frowned at the situation. Lu Li, who had come to watch the battle but had no chance to go on stage, curled his lips and said, "What the hell? Why don't you let me go up?" Hearing this, Gu Nin turned his head and gave him a weird smile. In Lu Li's eyes, his expression was one of disdain. Lu Li was about to say something when Lan Si put on a bright smile and suddenly shouted, "Explode!" There seemed to be some invisible ripples sweeping across the field in an instant, and something on Qin Xuanji seemed to be detonated. Bang! 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 A series of explosions rang out. The water stains all over Qin Xuanji's body instantly became the most lethal weapon, directly exploding on the surface of her body. The power of each explosion was not big, but these explosions were mixed in the water stains. How many bombs were on Qin Xuanji? Lan Si probably didn't know the answer herself. She only knew that this blow alone was enough to make the opponent lose the ability to fight. Countless flowers of blood burst out from Qin Xuanji's body. The blood and the girl's pale face made her look beautiful and coquettish, revealing a strange sense of beauty. Gu Nin's eyes narrowed slightly, and he whispered with a kind of nostalgia, "Flowers." This was the signature picture of the Oracle of Flowers taking action, which was the real meaning of the word flowers. Unfortunately, although the god of flowers had a nice name, she belonged to the Dark Pantheon, and she mostly used such bloody means. In the blink of an eye, Qin Xuanji was covered with blood. She was about to be defeated, but the next moment, the situation changed again. Just as Lan Si revealed a victorious smile on her face and her mind began to relax, her opponent suddenly changed. From a person, he turned into a giant snake. The giant snake with scarlet scales all over its body bit down on Lan Si, its monstrous mouth almost covering the entire sky. Gu Nin had seen this scene before, but at that time, Qin Xuanji could only transform into a head at the innate level, but now she had transformed her whole body. "Bloodline carrier," Lu Li instantly exclaimed. The same exclamations continued to ring out, even behind the middle-aged woman. It was clear that not everyone among them knew Qin Xuanji's identity. Lan Si's face instantly turned pale. She was not good at fighting, so she couldn't react for a moment. Lan Ta's figure appeared in front of her at the crucial moment. He raised a shield made of blue mist and blocked Qin Xuanji's mouth with brute force. Seeing this, Lu Yiming didn't wait for Lan Ta to speak and said, "We lost this round." Lan Ta helped his sister off the stage, still in shock, and nodded at Lu Yiming. "Thank you. I'll take over the next round." On the other side, Qin Xuanji had also returned to her human form, and she was still wearing that strange red dress. Only now did everyone realize that the dress was probably formed from her scales. After Qin Xuanji left the stage, Lu Qi arranged for someone to treat her wounds. When she arrived at the back of the stage, an angry voice immediately shouted, "Xuanji, who beat you up like this?" A young man was walking over quickly. Seeing Qin Xuanji's mangled body, he couldn't restrain his anger and asked. Qin Xuanji's expression didn't even change. She shook her head and said, "I'm fine." Actually, she was really fine. Her wounds looked terrible, but they were all superficial. With her physique as a bloodline carrier, even if she didn't move, she would automatically recover in a few days. However, the young man suddenly stomped his foot. "Aunt Lu really let you go? How could she? Tell me who did this. I want my father to beat him to death." Qin Xuanji was already used to this scene, so she simply shut her mouth and applied the ointment on herself. Her physique was not like that of a normal person. As long as she treated her wounds properly, her scales could be strengthened instead. Seeing this, the young man could only angrily walk out of the back of the stage and toward the stage. Someone at the door quickly stopped him and smiled apologetically. "Young Master Feng. Master Feng has instructed that you can't go over there. Bullsh asterisk T." Young Master Feng pushed the man away. "Xuanji was beaten up like this. If I didn't come here, were you going to keep hiding it from me?" The man didn't dare to get involved in the conflict between these important people, so he could only smile apologetically. Chapter 83. By the time young Master Feng arrived at the arena, the third battle was nearing its end. Lanta's opponent was a skinny man. He wasn't famous, but he was extremely powerful. He wasn't any weaker than Yi Qinglan. He was one of Lu Qi's trump cards. This kind of unknown great expert was the real trump card. No one knew where she found such a person. However, Lu Qi had miscalculated this time. Lanta's methods were more unpredictable than his sister's, and his battle awareness was more mature. His tactics were commendable even in the eyes of an expert like Gu Nan. The battle had been going according to Lanta's rhythm from the beginning. He first attacked with the same blue water pillar to force his opponent to move. When his opponent finally dodged the water pillar and arrived in front of him, Lanta showed his trump card. 6 beams of blue light shot out. The skinny man was shot in the face. After the blossoming flower mark was placed on him, he could only be suppressed all the way. It was clear that he was going to lose. Feng Zhuotang's expression was solemn as he watched. He was well aware of the skinny man's strength. They were going to win this battle, but they didn't expect his opponent to find strong reinforcements. In this way, the pressure on him would be even greater. At that moment, he saw a young man walking over angrily. It was his only son, Feng Luan. "Lun, what are you doing here?" Feng Zhuotang frowned, and his expression darkened. "Didn't I tell you to stay in the backfield?" Feng Luan, who had been furious, restrained himself after his father reprimanded him. He said angrily, "Dad, Xuanji is so badly injured." Feng Zhuotang glared at him. "What does her condition have to do with you? Don't harass her in the future. Do you think I don't know what's going on?" Feng Zhuotang was already displeased with his son's pursuit of Qin Xuanji, a woman of unknown origin. Now that he found out that Qin Xuanji was a bloodline carrier, he couldn't let his son provoke her anymore. "Why?" Feng Lun almost exploded on the spot. He looked at his father, dumbfounded. Feng Zhuotang's face darkened. Just as he was about to reprimand him, someone beside him said in a low voice, "Master Feng, Madame Lu invites you over." Feng Zhuotang was slightly taken aback when he heard this and immediately turned to look at the stage. Indeed, the victor had been decided. Lu Qi nodded slightly at him, indicating that it was time for him to act. Thus, this swordsman with the title of Gale and Sudden Storm did not bother to teach his son a lesson and immediately walked onto the stage. On the other side, as expected, Lu Yiming turned to Gu Nan and said, "Mr. Gu, please lend us a hand in this battle." "All right." Gu Nan nodded lightly and stepped onto the stage. Gu Nan was quite famous on this side, but obviously it hadn't spread to the 6-star region yet. Most people on Lu 7's side didn't recognize this young man. Only Lu Qi himself and a few other contestants had serious expressions on their faces. Feng Luan was still sulking at the side when he heard a surprised and cold voice. Gu Nan. Hearing this familiar voice, Feng Luan quickly turned to look. Qin Xuanji had already returned to his side. She had just applied the ointment on herself and was covered in wounds, but her face was full of surprise. Xuanji, you know him? Feng Luan pointed at Gu Nan, who had his hand raised. He had a doubtful expression and an indescribable jealousy. In his impression, Qin Xuanji had never changed her expression because of anyone. She always had that calm and composed expression, and it was this calmness that fascinated him the most. Even in the 6-star region, there weren't many people who would constantly pay attention to the stars ranking. After all, those people were too far away from them. Hence, the two of them obviously didn't know much about Gu Nan's recent achievements. But Qin Xuanji still nodded heavily. He is very strong. Feng Luan showed some dissatisfaction and asked, Is this person stronger than my father? Qin Xuanji seemed to ponder seriously before replying. It's hard to say. He was just a Xiantian a few months ago. If Lord Feng is careful, you won't be afraid of him. A few months ago, he was still a Xiantian? Feng Luan nearly laughed out and said with disdain, How can a newly advanced transcendent be a match for my father? Qin Xuanji didn't say anything. She would never argue with others. She had been like this since the first time Gu Nan met her. Feng Luan knew her personality and didn't wait for her to speak before speaking. Xuanji, just watch. My father will definitely send that guy off the stage in a few slashes. Qin Xuanji was still looking at the stage in silence with a grave expression. She felt that she had improved a lot during this period of time and had basically reached her expectations. She wondered what level Gu Nan was at. Her expression made Feng Luan feel even more sullen. He simply shouted at the stage, Father, beat that guy to death. He was just a Xiantian a few months ago. Feng Luan's voice wasn't soft, and everyone around him heard him clearly. Instantly, there were a few sneers and some discussions. Finding a newly advanced transcendent to fight? Looks like this match is a gift from the opponent. There's no other way. It's not easy to invite a true expert. Using some people to fight Lord Feng is also a strategy. That's true. Looks like the outcome will depend on the 5th match. Seeing that his words had an effect, Feng Luan revealed a pleased expression. He glanced at Qin Xuanji, but the latter was still expressionless. Feng Zhuotong, who was on the stage, also heard this, and his expression instantly turned ugly. Of course, he knew Gu Nan's background and hurriedly said, Mr. Gu, cut the crap. Let's fight. Gu Nan was already holding the crimson saber in his hand, his expression cold. Feng Zhuotong sighed inwardly and could only shut his mouth and focus. The domain under his feet was already slowly expanding, and there seemed to be countless long sabers dancing within it. The saber light made him look like a god descending. He knew the process of the battle between Gu Nan and Yi Qinglan, so he simply opened the domain first and didn't give Gu Nan a chance to make the first move. Seeing this, Feng Luan was even more pleased. He pointed at the stage and said, Xuanji, do you see that? That is the domain of an eternal domain cultivator. I'm afraid that Gu Nan can't even enter the domain. Halfway through his words, he suddenly couldn't continue. Even the laughter stopped abruptly. This was because the instant Feng Zhuotong took out his saber, Gu Nan's figure suddenly disappeared and immediately appeared above Feng Zhuotong's head, directly slashing down with his saber. Above his head, Feng Zhuotong's reaction was extremely fast. He instantly extracted thousands of saber intents and poured them into his long saber. He used his saber to meet Gu Nan's slash, while the other saber lights swept towards the enemy. Previously, when Gu Nan killed Yi Qinglan, many people already knew about his methods, so Feng Zhuotong was already prepared this time. With the support of thousands of saber intents, the long saber finally managed to block the Bloody King's blade and didn't get cut in half. The other saber lights also hit Gu Nan's body, instantly turning him into a bloody mess. Seeing this, Feng Luan heaved a sigh of relief. However, before he could say anything, he saw that Gu Nan was forced to take a step back and simply stood there motionlessly. Feng Zhuotong smiled bitterly. Everyone thinks that your excellency defeated Yi Qinglan by relying on a divine weapon, but I didn't expect your excellency's control of the domain to be so superb. He knew very well what had just happened. When he used the power of his domain to block Gunnan's saber, Gunnan's domain had actually turned into countless silk threads and penetrated his remaining domain. His saber domain had been forcefully broken, and there was now a shadow under his feet. I lost this battle, Feng Zhuotong said sincerely. Thank you, Mr. Gu, for showing mercy. In his opinion, since the other party had stopped after one slash, he had naturally shown mercy. Otherwise, he would have been seriously injured even if he didn't die after another slash. Gunnan looked down at his body. After waiting for 3 seconds, the praise of dawn had already taken effect, and his injuries were rapidly recovering. As an expert player, he would try not to get injured if he could. This was a kind of obsessive-compulsive disorder. Chapter 84. The special triggering conditions of Dawn's praise could be considered a restriction on this kind of super recovery ability. It was not to the extent that one would be invincible after wearing this set of clothes. In the hands of a player like Gunnan, it became a supplementary method of kiting tactics. After exchanging health with the enemy, he would run away decisively and come back to fight again when his health was full. Gunnan's power was actually not as terrifying as Feng Zhuotong thought. Or rather, his correct response made Gunnan's advantage not so obvious. Feng Zhuotong's level was slightly higher than Yi Qinglan's. In order to deal with him, Gunnan had also used a large amount of shadow power to break the rules on his opponent's blade. Although he had occupied the opponent's domain according to the habits of veteran players, there was not much power in it, so Feng Zhuotong was not completely helpless. Unfortunately, he had overestimated the grade of the blood blade and thought that the power to break the rules was all inherent to the weapon, so he had admitted defeat in advance. However, since his opponent had admitted defeat, Gunnan could not be bothered to do anything else. In any case, this time he was only helping Lu's family, not his own mission, so it made no difference whether he killed or not. Right now, he was more interested in the pair of blossom oracles. Why did the apostles of God come to the astral realm? Putting aside Gunnan's side, the outcome of the battle in the arena was decided in an instant, which really made the onlookers dumbfounded. In particular, Fenglin, who had a bellyful of words stuck in his stomach, blushed. Qin Xuanji's eyes sparkled, and there was an unconcealable shock in the depths of her eyes. In just a few short months, he had actually broken through to the eternal domain realm. Is this the power of the mandate of heaven? As someone who had come out of the Bright Tower at the same time as Gunnan, Qin Xuanji probably knew the most about him in this world. At the very least, he could obtain additional benefits from reincarnation. This was something that only she knew. Thinking of this, she felt a little relieved. Reincarnation was a means to bypass the rules of time. In her inherited memories, some truly powerful reincarnators had even existed longer than the world itself. No one knew how much time Gunnan had spent in the reincarnation world in the past few months, so it was not accurate to judge based on this. Feng Zhuotong's defeat at the hands of Gunnan didn't mean that he had lost. Even Lu Qi's side had lost 3 out of the 5 matches, and there was no need for the last one. This famous saber wielder on the Stars ranking didn't even have the chance to execute his signature move, Blast Storm, and was directly defeated by a single blade from Gunnan. This was truly astonishing. Lu Qi shook his head lightly and comforted him. Sir Feng, you don't have to blame yourself. It was that he of Gu Lu of Shang, and he of that he of Gu. She was an of. She of Wu that was of a of Wu of Tian of when true top experts fought. It was common for them to fight for 3 days and 3 nights, or for the outcome to be decided in an instant. It could only be said that their side was indeed unprepared. Whether it was Su Yuanjun or Gunnan, they were almost guaranteed to win, leaving her too few opportunities. At the end of the duel, both sides of the Lu's family began to negotiate, and the group of foreign helpers began to leave the arena. Qin Xuanji tried to find Gunnan, but she couldn't find him. She frowned and decided to leave first. If he wanted to meet her, he would show up sooner or later. Feng Zhuotong also returned, but Feng Luan was still in disbelief. Dad, didn't that guy just get promoted? How could this be? He asked in astonishment. When Feng Zhuotong heard this, the anger in his heart flared up again, and he slapped him hard across the face, causing young Master Feng to stumble. That Gunan only debuted for a few months and is already a member of the stars ranking. Who do you think you are? How dare you behave so presumptuously? Feng Zhuotong reprimanded. Feng Luan didn't dare to speak after being reprimanded, but he still didn't think much of it. His father was also a member of the stars ranking, and they weren't inferior to each other. What was there to be afraid of? He didn't dare to talk back to Feng Zhuotong. When he saw Qin Xuanji turning to leave, he wanted to jog to catch up, but he was pulled back by Feng Zhuotong. I asked you to stop interacting with Qin Xuanji. Didn't you understand? Oh. Feeling the strictness in his father's tone, young Master Feng quickly admitted defeat. Moments later, Qin Xuanji returned to her room. She opened the door a little, but she quickly closed it again. Come out, she shouted coldly behind her. Feng Lun popped his head out with a grin and said, Xuanji, I saw everything. Do you have friends in your room? Can you introduce me to him? Just as he finished speaking, Feng Lun suddenly felt the temperature drop by a few degrees, and he felt a chill down his back. He realized that Qin Xuanji, who he was so familiar with, was now looking at him like a stranger. It was as though she was looking at a dead man. Just as he felt his breathing getting hurried and his heart feeling as though it was being gripped by some kind of force, an enchanting female voice sounded and rescued him. Qin Xuanji, look at this young man. He is about to be scared out of his wits by you. Feng Luan suddenly felt his body lighten, and the pressure seemed to have vanished. A tall and slender woman with almost perfect proportions was standing in front of him. This woman was wearing a trendy casual outfit that revealed half of her arms and calves. Her face was painted with many strange patterns, and she even had a mix of different colors of eyeshadow. Her entire being exuded the word demon. However, her appearance was extremely pure, and even her eyes were exceptionally clear. Her pair of big eyes seemed to be able to seduce one's soul. Third last, it's none of your business. Seeing that she had taken the initiative to appear, Qin Xuanji had no intention of silencing her. However, her tone became even colder. The woman named Third Last covered her mouth and chuckled. Without looking at Feng Luan, she said, I'm not here to gossip with you. I have a temporary mission for you. What mission do you need to inform me about? It's news from someone above. Speaking of serious matters, Third Last continued. The people from White Fog have secretly come here to meet a person called Gunan. We have to figure out the purpose of their meeting. Gunan? Gunan again? Feng Luan exclaimed before Qin Xuanji could speak. Third Last widened her beautiful eyes and stared at him. Brother, do you know who Gunan is? It was obviously a rare experience to be stared at by a woman who was taller than him by a head. Feng Lun swallowed his saliva and said, Yes, I know. Third Last continued to stare at him. Can you tell me then? Of course. As soon as Feng Lun finished speaking, a figure appeared in front of Third Last at a speed that was hard to see with the naked eye. She then stared at him in shock as he cut her arm with a sword. Light golden blood flowed out of Third Last's body, but the other party quickly collected it. Who are you? Chapter 85. Ever since Gunan saw the woman named Third Last, he knew that she had something to do with his mission. He did not need any hints from the evil god's temple, nor did he need any clues to guide him. He could tell that there was something wrong with her face just by looking at her face. Although Third Last's attire seemed flirtatious, it did not match her temperament at all. A woman who had the intention of seducing someone would not make such a mistake. Hence, there was only one possibility. She had other considerations, which was why she dressed up like that. Based on that conjecture, it would be much easier for him to discover something when he looked at her face again. For example, there is actually a natural pattern between Third Last's eyebrows under the layers of patterns. It was an exquisite eagle that ordinary people might not care about, but Gunan had seen its true form before. It was Max. This woman's blood was the real condition to activate Max. Gunan immediately thought of the intention of the game designer. Even though there was no designer here, Third last was completely locked on by the shadow power and could only watch as her blood was being drained. She stammered, Mr. Gu, what's the matter? Gunan looked up in confusion, but he did not stop moving his hands. He had already collected half a bottle of pale golden blood. Third last was momentarily at a loss for words. She was here to find out what the white mist's motive was for meeting Gunan. However, how could she ask Gunan that directly? She wouldn't dare to believe it, even if Gunan told her. Feng Luan, who was at the side, was dumbfounded. He finally snapped back to his senses and hollered, Gunan, hurry up and let this lady go. Even if you're on the stars list, my father is... Bang! Gunan sent him flying with a wave of shadow hand, dead or alive. Gunan would never show mercy to an NPC that had no value. When Gunan's bottle was almost full, Gunan nodded in satisfaction and said to Third Last, You said that you want to know why the white mist is looking for me, right? When Three Last realized that she could move, she hurriedly stopped the bleeding and nodded repeatedly. During this period of time, you shall stay by my side. I'll bring you along when the time comes, Gunan said and lifted Third Last up, not giving her a chance to refuse at all. He shook the bottle in his hand and felt that it could only produce a few dozen units of max. If this route was indeed the correct mission route, then he couldn't let this woman escape. He soon left with Three Last and did not speak to Qin Xuanji at all, causing her to be in a daze. She had yet to react even after Gunan disappeared. Hey, don't you know Qin Xuanji? Third Last asked Gunan on the way back. When Qin Xuanji joined the organization, she talked about her previous experience. Although she didn't go into details, she did mention Gunan. That was why she came to ask Qin Xuanji for help. However, she didn't expect Gunan to ignore her at all. Gunan was slightly stunned and immediately said, You might be related to the mission, so of course you're more important. I can't care about the others. The player's logic had always been that they liked to chat with NPCs when they had nothing to do. When there was a mission, they would definitely go straight to the NPCs who were tasked with the mission. If they had to greet them one by one, they would be crazy. What mission? Third Last asked curiously. She had just used the same trick that she used on Feng Luan on Gunan. I'm not sure yet, so I'm going to use some of her blood to try, Gunan answered seriously. Third Last said, Gunan brought Third Last to the laboratory where Professor Lu Ming, who was in charge of the experiment today, was also present. Gunan asked, Professor Lu, is there anything abnormal about the target's data? It's basically normal. The optimal feeding ratio shows that the target is tending to feed a small amount of food multiple times, Lu Ming, who was an old man with white hair, said calmly. Gunan nodded and took out a bag of pink crystals. Use this to try feeding. It was the medicine that he had secretly used Third Last blood to produce in the max mark. Lu Ming agreed, and at the same time, he took the bag of crystals that Gunan had given him for a ratio analysis to see if there were any differences in its composition with the previous ones. That girl, what's going on with her? Third Last asked curiously. Gunan didn't care if she was testing him or not, and simply said, She has a large amount of vital energy accumulated in her body. Using this medicine can help her resolve her internal energy and also improve her cultivation level. Then, Third Last exclaimed, Has she been like this ever since she started cultivating? You know? Gunan squinted his eyes and thought to himself, indeed. She's someone with a max mark between her eyebrows. How could she have nothing to do with the mission? Third Last gritted her teeth and said, Those with our bloodline are all like this, but she wanted to keep him in suspense, but she looked at Gunan, who was still expressionless. Hence, she had no choice but to say, However, the situation is generally not serious. The vital energy will gradually resolve it, and in turn, it will promote our cultivation. Gunan nodded, but he was not in a hurry to take out the max mark. Lin Yunyun's condition was clearly not a simple mutation caused by her bloodline. Otherwise, she wouldn't have reached this stage. After the max crystal made from Third Last blood was fed to Lin Yunyun, there was a sudden change in the room. It was as if Lin Yunyun had taken too much tonic all of a sudden. She began to yell and pound her surroundings frantically, destroying everything she could see. Bang! The custom-made glass in front of Gu Nin was strong enough to block the attack of a peak Khanate cultivator, but it was shattered by her majestic, vital energy. Without the isolation of the glass, even Third Lass could feel the terrifying aura coming from her body. She was shocked to discover that Lin Yunyun's internal energy was much stronger than hers. When she was young, Lin Yunyun had accumulated more than 10 years of unhindered cultivation, allowing her vital energy to exceed that of ordinary cultivators. Now, it had been activated. Lin Yunyun shrieked and dashed towards Gu Nan. The latter's expression did not change as he stretched out his right hand and grabbed gently, after which Lin Yunyun was immediately held in the air by a shadow hand. She could not move at all. Only then did Gu Nan slowly walk forward. Looking at the young girl's face, a faint smile appeared on his face, as well as a hint of relief from having solved a riddle. Between her eyebrows, there was a faint green light flickering. I see. The Lan siblings were walking side by side, and the younger sister, Lan Si, was making some witty remarks when her body suddenly trembled, and the same green light shone in the same position between her eyebrows. Lan Ta's eyes widened, and he felt like he was about to burst into tears. It's here. This is the aura of a god. Not too far away, Qin Xuanji stopped in her tracks and took out a green crystal from her bosom. There was a fragment wrapped within the crystal, and the fragment was emitting a faint green light. Hence, she smiled faintly and put the crystal back, after which she sent a message. The target has appeared. Near Qin Xuanji's residence, Feng Luan crawled out of the ruins. He could not withstand Gu Nan's attack, and he could not stop vomiting blood. His blood flowed down his neck and onto the pendant in front of his chest. The blue round stone on top of the pendant seemed to be attracted by something and began to emit a faint light. Feng Lun lowered his head in confusion, only to realize that there was a coolness coming from the round stone, which instantly spread to his limbs and bones. It made him feel extremely comfortable, and his injuries began to recover gradually. This feels great. What treasure is this? Feng Luan looked at the round stone in surprise. It's indeed something that Dad brought back from the ancient ruins. Chapter 86. In Gu Nan's laboratory, Lin Yunyun was being held by the shadow hand, but she was still struggling violently while the green light between her eyebrows flickered. This is... Third Last looked at the green light and subconsciously touched her eyebrows where the symbol of a golden eagle was hidden. However, the girl in front of her clearly had the bloodline of her race, but her eyebrows were covered by a ball of green light. This is a god stone, Gu Nan said calmly. He did not intend to explain further. On this planet, the Lan siblings and himself were probably the only people who knew what a god stone was. He did not want to cause trouble for himself. The god stone was the carrier of the divine fire and was also the foundation of the gods. In other systems, it was also known as the godhood. The one that Lin Yunyun had should only be a fragment of the god stone, and it was not the main body. However, even so, it suppressed the power of her bloodline and caused her to have a painful childhood. The power of the god stone was only fully activated when it was catalyzed by the bloodline of the same race. The moment Gu Nan saw the fragment of the god stone, he finally understood the entire sequence of events. The root of the chain of events was the fragment of the god stone, and the series of events also led him to find a way to catalyze the fragment. A god stone. It's a water-type god stone, Gu Nan said with a chuckle. In that case, the goal of the siblings is clear. No, since they came, it means that the main body of the god stone is here too. I'm afraid it has already been completely activated. Gu Nan rubbed his chin and deduced based on his experience in his previous life. Encountering a god stone here was indeed beyond Gu Nan's expectations. The god stone was the foundation of the gods, and it was the same for the evil players. Among the players, the god stone had another name, Experience Stone. Apart from dungeons and events, were there any other ways for players to obtain some points? The answer was yes, but it was extremely rare, and the Experience Stone was one of them. Through a certain ritual, the God Stone could be directly converted into a player's sin points, which was set in the later stages of the game to encourage players to hunt the gods. Of course, it was a success. In the later stages of the game, almost all the gods were killed by the players. Otherwise, the players wouldn't have enough sin points. The explanation given by the game officials was that blasphemy was the greatest sin. The memory of the god's stone flashed through Gu Nan's mind in an instant. He looked at Lin Yunyun as if he was looking at a rare treasure. At this moment, no matter what happened or what dungeon it was, nothing was more important than that green light. Even the lowest level experience stone is equivalent to hundreds of thousands of sin points. Normally, even with Gu Nan's abilities, he would not be able to kill a god before reaching Tier 5. In other words, Divine Stones were meant for Tier 5 players and above. If Gu Nan could get a God Stone when he reached the 3rd rank, then he would have to find a way to earn enough points to advance. Gu Nan poured a bucket of cold water on himself. After he calmed down, he realized that the evil god's palace in his mind had sent him a new notification. An event triggered. Lan Si's fall. Gu Nan squinted his eyes. He knew that this was probably the last part of the chain of events. Fall. Feng Luan was in pain and happiness recently. He was in pain because ever since the shouting incident during the duel, everyone looked at him strangely, as though they were mocking him. Ever since Feng Zhuotong publicly lost to Gu Nan, Lu Qi's men started to investigate Gu Nan. This investigation was serious. The news of the battle between Gu Nan and Yi Qinglan was still spreading, and it easily caught their attention. Star's Rancor, the fastest breakthrough in a century. The shocking achievement of killing the Bittersword Saint, Yi Qinglan. Overnight, no one questioned how Gu Nan had defeated Feng Zhuotong. Instead, Feng Lun, who had made a fool of himself before the battle, became the one who was beaten up. Of course, with his father's support, no one dared to hit him, but it was inevitable to laugh at him behind his back. He was happy because Feng Zhuotong seemed to be busy with something these few days and didn't have time to bother him. And the pendant on his neck gave him a huge surprise. The blue round stone's radiance could no longer be seen, but Feng Luan could feel that it didn't really disappear, but it was hiding itself. The cool feeling continued to spread from his neck, constantly transforming his body, making him feel stronger with every passing moment. Young Master Feng might have a vile character and like to flirt, but he was still a martial artist. As long as one was a martial artist, no one could resist this temptation. In just 2 days, Feng Luan realized that his arm strength and speed had increased by more than 30%. Even his mind was much clearer, and his memory was much stronger. This blue round stone seemed to have increased his abilities in all aspects. Even his learning of martial skills and cultivation techniques were much faster than before. If this is the case, perhaps I can become a martial artist. Young Master Feng was overwhelmed with emotions. He thought of his father's heroic appearance in the Sea of Stars, and a long-cherished wish of his youth resurfaced in his mind. But the next moment, the image of his father being defeated by that person with a single slash appeared in his mind. Young Master Feng's face darkened, and he had a new goal in his mind. When I become a peerless martial artist, I must beat that Gu Nan to the ground. News of the Godstone's appearance was only noticed by a few groups of people. No matter how many undercurrents were surging under the surface was still calm, as usual. Qin Xuanji confirmed that she had a target in 66 Amaterasu and began to gather people. The Lan siblings, with the help of the gods, made faster progress and had already begun to investigate. Gu Nan, on the other hand, was different from them. He was waiting. The early appearance of the new event did not prevent him from waiting for Lin Yunyun's cultivation to be complete, and after she became a transcendent, then he would start looking for the God Stone. Players had some ways to find and use the God Stone, but the method that Gu Nan wanted to use required Lin Yunyun's cooperation. Of course, she could not cooperate in her current state. Gu Nan looked at Lin Yunyun, who was crazily moving in the room. Her inner breath was turbulent, and she was extremely powerful. He rubbed his forehead and asked, "How long will it take to use the new medicine to push her cultivation to the maximum?" Perhaps it was because the max crystal produced by the blood of the three tails was especially effective. Lin Yunyun's cultivation was growing at a faster rate than before. About 5 days, Professor Lu Ming answered without much hesitation. But then, he said hesitantly, Mr. Gu, with the target's current mental state, I'm afraid there will be trouble during the advancement. Gunan frowned slightly. Is there any way to calm her down? It's best to give her more space to move around. It's best if it's natural, Lu Ming said. She's like a beast now. She only has biological instincts, but her intelligence is blinded by illusions. For the time being, let her stay in the courtyard. Get 2 transcendents to keep an eye on her. Lu Ming was stunned. Mr. Gu, it's not easy to invite transcendents, let alone this kind of thing. Chapter 87. Searching for God's stone required Lin Yunyun to recover her consciousness and cooperate with the response search. Now, all Gu Nan could do was wait. Of course, while he was waiting, he had something else to do. The Reincarnators organization that Lan Marigold had introduced to him had finally arrived at the 9th Star Sector. A group of people was walking slowly in front of Hidden Villa. Lan Marigold was in the lead. Behind her were the 3 people from White Mist. Elder Qin, there are 2 more. Lan Marigold stood in front of the villa. That person is waiting for you inside. I won't be going in. Introducing the Reincarnators organization was just a deal between her and Gunan. She was not interested in getting involved. Elder Qi nodded. Thank you. Lan Marigold quickly disappeared. Wei Ro, who had been keeping a straight face, said, We're already on 66 Amaterasu, and he still wants us to meet him. He's really putting on airs. Wei Ro's father and Yi Qinglan were old acquaintances. Hence, she had a bad impression of Gunan. She had been trying to stop them from meeting since they were on Starship. He has the right to put on airs, Li Liu said lazily. Storm Fengzhuatong. Our organization doesn't have many experts like him, but he was defeated by him in one move. TSK, TSK. Wei Ro's expression turned ugly. Elder Qin shook his head again. All right, we're already here. Let's not talk about such useless things. As Elder Qin made the final decision, the 3 of them had no choice but to walk into the villa. The villa's layout was not complicated. Although there were no servants in order to keep it a secret, they still walked into the inner hall easily. Gunan was indeed waiting for them. However, there was someone next to Gunan that they did not expect. Gunan was sitting in the main seat. When he saw the 3 of them enter, he gestured to the young lady beside him with his lips. The guests are here. Go and pour them a cup of tea. Yes. The young lady's expression darkened, but she had to reply in a low voice. 3-tail. Wei Ro was the first to exclaim. They weren't enemies with the organization that Third Last was in, but they definitely weren't on good terms either. Hence, it wasn't a good sign for Third Last to appear there. Even Elder Qin said with a sullen expression, Mr. Gu, what do you mean by this? So you guys know me, the maidservant? Gunan was surprised and seemed to have no idea about the relationship between the 3 of them and the 3 last. Perhaps Gunan's acting skills were superb, or perhaps he did not want to fall out with them immediately. Elder Qin said in a deep voice, The 3-tails is our organization's enemy and not a friend. Before he could finish, Gunan had already interrupted him. I don't care who she used to be, but she belongs to me now. If anyone in your organization is unconvinced, get them to look for me, Gunan said while glancing at 3 last. 3 last secretly rolled her eyes, but she had no choice but to put on a grateful expression. She looked at Gunan with her big eyes, feeling extremely frustrated. Gunan had fulfilled his promise and brought her to the meeting, but the price was to make her his maidservant. Gunan's resolute words made the 3 of them turn to look at 3 last again. At this moment, 3 last was indeed very different for what they remembered her to be. Not only was she dressed in a standard black and white maid outfit, but the makeup on her face had also been completely washed off. Her small face was bare, and the slightly mysterious pattern between her eyebrows accentuated her temperament. Lilio had a peculiar expression on his face, and he whispered to Elder Qin, Elder, I don't think he's faking it, and Elder Qin knew what he was going to say. If Gunan had the intention to betray them, he could have just gotten 3 last to hide in the dark. There was no need for them to know. This matter might really be a misunderstanding. At the thought of this, Elder Qin smiled again, and after exchanging a few pleasantries with Gunan, he quickly got to the point. I heard that Mr. Gu is interested in joining our organization? Yes. Gunan answered straightforwardly. He then said, let's get straight to the point. I'll provide protection for your organization, and you'll give me the method to obtain world missions. How about that? That's impossible. The method to translate the world, will, is the foundation of the organization. Only the two commanders know about it. It's impossible to trade it. Elder Qin shook his head without hesitation. Gunan was not disappointed because he had thought of that possibility a long time ago. He continued, let's change the condition. I need a large number of missions for me to choose from. Even if he could not obtain the method to receive missions for the time being, Gunan could still go to the middle-level world and complete a large number of missions as long as he could find enough missions. After calming down from the joy of seeing the experience stone, Gunan also realized that dungeons and events were the foundation, and the experience stone was at most a shortcut. This shortcut wouldn't allow him to clear the missions directly and would only allow him to complete half of the missions. The other half would have to be completed by himself. Even if he obtained the experience stone in the end, Gunan would have to clear the instance dungeon to earn points. Therefore, the White Mist organization was not to be missed. With regards to Gunan's new condition, Elder Qin went into a deep thought. It wasn't a problem to take out a large number of missions for Gunan to choose from. Even their elders had similar authority. But the problem was, would they be satisfied with this? Wei Ro, who was at the side, suddenly spoke. Mr. Gu, you mentioned that you can provide protection with martial strength. I wonder what kind of martial strength you can provide. After a pause, she sneered. Our second commander is someone who can fight evenly with one of the 9 stars. The so-called 9 stars refer to the 9 strongest individuals on the stars ranking. The stars ranking didn't differentiate who was superior and only selected people based on talent and achievements. But since ancient times, there was no second place in martial arts. There would always be meddlesome people who wanted to rank the stars ranking to see who was the true number 1 extraordinary. After a few of these meddlesome people were killed by experts, there was finally no one who was the number 1 courting death. But gradually, the 9 stars candidates were announced to represent the 9 strongest individuals on the stars ranking. Of course, there were still plenty of people who weren't on the stars ranking, like the second commander of the White Mist. He was terrifyingly strong, but very few people had heard of him. Gunan had an indifferent expression and spoke casually. Words are no proof. Why don't you try and you will know? He couldn't be bothered to argue with these NPCs. If the 3 of them didn't agree, he would simply kill 2 of them and detain 1. Once the matters here were settled, the remaining 1 would lead the way to the 6-star region. That's exactly what I was thinking. He didn't expect Wei Ro to laugh and stand up. Are you crazy? Li Liu looked at her in astonishment. He had thought of all kinds of methods that Wei Ro would use to create trouble and had prepared several countermeasures. But he didn't expect her to do this. What kind of person was this Gunan? He was someone who could defeat a stars ranking expert in a single blade. Wei Ro's strength was at most on par with his. Would she be courting death if she went up? Wei Ro stood up and took out an item from her bosom. She showed it to Gunan and said, in this painting, there is a sword intent from my father. I would like to invite Mr. Gu to try it. On the painting that Wei Ro had unfolded, there was a swordsman performing a sword dance in the snow. There was a hazy sword intent enveloping it, causing the swordsman to seem to be moving. He was brandishing his sword one by one like a graceful dance. It was only until the last sword that he abruptly thrust out of the painting, causing all the spectators to feel a pressing sense of sharpness. Gunan, who was facing the painting, saw a sharp sword drilling out of the painting and cleaving at him. Wei Ro revealed a light smile. Her father was the organization's number 3 expert and was already a veteran of the Eternal Domain realm. His sword intent was extremely condensed, and she wanted to see how Gunan was going to deal with it. His spirit was sealed, and there was no way to avoid it. Only by drawing his saber would he be able to block this sword. Wei Ro already had a plan in mind for Gunan. If he had to use all his strength and was only able to block her father's sword through the air, wouldn't it mean that his cultivation wasn't enough? Unexpectedly, when facing such a sword, Gunan didn't make any movements to dodge or draw his saber. He simply allowed the sword light to descend. The sword congealed into a light sword and pierced right into Gunan's chest. It seemed to be blocked by something and was shaking nonstop. At this moment, all three of them, including Wei Ro, were stunned. This Gunan was so weak, the air seemed to have frozen for a moment. Moments later, the expressionless Gunan reached out his hand and instantly pulled out the light sword and threw it at Wei Ro's feet. He touched his chest, which had already recovered, and looked at the painting that was still floating in mid-air. The human figure inside had yet to dissipate. Chapter 88. After Wei Ro threw the scroll, she lost control of the scroll. That scroll was a trump card that her father, Wei Donghai, had left for her. She had never used it before, but against Gunan, she could not help but use it. Even Wei Ro did not know that her father's clone was hidden inside the scroll. As if hearing Gunan's words, the sword-wielding figure in the painting slowly stopped moving and made a soft sigh. Then, he slowly walked out of the painting. If a beautiful girl walked out of the scroll, it would have been a very beautiful scene. But now, it was an ordinary-looking middle-aged man. Aside from Gunan, everyone else felt a chill. Even Three Tails felt a chill in their hearts. A mind projection, a clone. This was close to break world class. Wei Ro looked very happy. From what she saw, her father's power had reached this level. It was only natural for him to suppress Gunan. Gunan watched coldly from the sidelines. Wei Donghai's power was not bad. He had a crime value of 300, and his core skill had an esoteric level. But if that was all, Han's son had skills and equipment. He was not afraid of the enemy, and it was just a clone. I am Wei Donghai. The middle-aged man's face did not show any emotion. He looked cold as he spoke. The practice atmosphere in the 6th system was better than in the 9th system. So, there were still some ancient customs. For example, Wei Donghai was a Tao Lord. He quietly looked at Gunan. He looked at this young man who had suddenly risen up. He wanted to see how he would respond to him. Wei Donghai was not like his daughter. He did not have a personal bias against Gunan. For a person of his status, Yi Qinglan's death could not be blamed on others since she died in a public duel. Gunan wanted to enter the White Mist. That was where he wanted to test the young man. If Han San wanted to join, he would have to show enough power. So, Wei Donghai said, I heard Gunan wants to join the White Mist. I will test his power on behalf of the two leaders. Gunan nodded. Okay. The moment his voice fell, Gunan's blood saber had already slashed out. Wei Donghai's sword was fast, and so was Gunan's saber. However, the speed of the two was different. The former used extraordinary sword intent to stun the enemy's mind, while the latter was simply fast. The combination of absolute power and absolute speed was not fancy at all. The pure, explosive power of the body made this saber move incredibly fast. Wei Donghai's expression finally turned serious. He raised his sword, and a majestic sword will instantly enveloped Gunan's mind. But what surprised him was that his sword essence did not affect his opponent at all. The saber light was still as fast as before. Clang! The crimson saber clashed with Wei Donghai's phantom, and the sound of metal clashing rang out. Wei Donghai forcefully withstood the blade, but the price he paid was that the scroll behind him suddenly paused. Then, with a ripping sound, a terrifying crack appeared on it. His sword stabbed Gunan, but the latter didn't even bat an eyelid. A hair-raising sound was heard, and Wei Ro's smile began to stiffen. Even Wei Donghai's expression froze. He didn't expect the divine weapon in Gunan's hands to be so sharp. This slash almost destroyed his clone's carrier. He hurriedly said, "Little friend Gu," ripping. Gunan was expressionless. Another slash landed on the head of Wei Donghai's clone, and another crack appeared on the scroll. Wei Donghai's mouth twitched. He was in his spirit form, so he didn't feel any pain. However, the carrier painting was frantically reminding him that if he didn't run, he wouldn't be able to keep this clone. "Little friend, wait," Wei Donghai shouted as he quickly retreated. Unfortunately, as a spirit, how could he outrun Gunan, a dignified agility-type evil god? In the blink of an eye, Gunan caught up with him. 6 consecutive slashes landed, and the already tattered scroll was directly smashed into pieces. Without a carrier, Wei Donghai's clone could no longer exist. After a few flashes, it completely disappeared. This elite, who was beyond the eternal area and had touched the break world level, acted as if he had never appeared. He completely disappeared from Gunan's villa. Wei Ro looked at everything in front of her in shock. Her fingers were still shaking. Killing the Bittersword Saint and defeating Feng Zhuotong with 1 slash were not as shocking as seeing her father's clone get killed in front of her. On the other hand, Gunan seemed as if he'd done a trivial matter that wasn't worth mentioning, and he casually put away the crimson blade before smiling lightly as he sat back on the seat of the host. And then he swept the 3 of them with his gaze and said, "Now we can have a proper talk." After showing off his muscles and destroying Wei Donghai's clone, the negotiation between Gunan and the White Mist went unbelievably smoothly. Wei Ro didn't say anything, and Elder Qin didn't raise any conditions. He just confirmed Gunan's attitude and invited him to go to the White Mist headquarters in the 6-star area as soon as possible. Gunan said he needed to delay it for a while. He would go to the White Mist headquarters, but not now. The last part of the chain of events had not been completed, and the Godstone was not in his hands yet. He could not leave now. After the White Mist was settled, Gunan's attention was focused on the 66 Amaterasu. The first person he looked at was Lan Si. The younger sister of the Flower God Messengers was not as strong as her brother. Otherwise, the name of the event would not have been Lan Si's fall. Fall! Gunan's face had a weird smile. His lips curled up. The word fall was not used casually when it came to God Messengers. There was only one situation that could be called fall, and that was to abandon their original beliefs. Gunan sat alone next to the window. He looked at the distant sky. No one knew what he was thinking. "Mister," a gentle voice sounded beside him. It was Third Last, who had walked in and stood beside him respectfully. Ever since she saw Gunan attack, she had been following Gunan around as if she was really a maidservant. Gunan was also happy to have someone to order him around. A common characteristic of players was that they were habitually generous. They would never reject NPCs who came to help them because they were not afraid of betrayal. The Lan siblings seemed to have been looking for something in the past few days, Third Last said in her unique, gentle voice. Since yesterday, their actions have slowed down. Perhaps they found their target, Third Last said in her unique, gentle voice without any makeup on her face. Who's the target? Gunan asked with a frown. Chapter 89. Gunan finally frowned after hearing what Third Last said. Lin Yunyun's condition was one of the main things he was concerned about. After all, it was the only fragment of the divine stone that he had, and all his future actions would revolve around it. Gunan asked about Lin Yunyun's condition almost every day, and according to the previous reports, Lin Yunyun should have reached the peak today and was ready to break through to the transcendent level. How did the target come into contact with Lin Yunyun at this time? Seeing that he was silent, Third Last thought that she had angered Gunan. Hence, she frantically said, "Lord, Lin Yun, let's talk on the way." Gunan stood up and waved his hand. "Let's go to the laboratory." While Gunan and Third Last were on the way to the laboratory in the hover car, Third Last began to brief them. It turned out that in the past few days, according to Gunan's previous instructions, Lin Yunyun was allowed to move around in the courtyard, which had indeed alleviated her anxiety. However, in the process, she accidentally came into contact with someone outside. You're saying that the person that was targeted by the Lan siblings and unintentionally came into contact with Lin Yunyun is that Fenglin? Gunan rubbed his chin, and his eyes revealed an expression that seemed to be lost in thought. Yes, we specifically went to check on Fenglin. He has changed a lot in the past few days, Third Last said with a peculiar expression. Gunan raised his eyebrows with a look of interest, and Third Last continued to speak. After listening to Third Last's narration, Gunan felt like he had heard an interesting story about a prodigal who turned over a new leaf. Fenglin, this hedonistic young master, seemed to have been enlightened ever since he was beaten up by her that day. Not only did he start to cultivate diligently, but there were also a few interesting things that happened to him. On the first day, Fenglin was ridiculed because of the previous duel. In the end, he suddenly unleashed his innate level 3 combat power and defeated his opponent. One must know that in the past, he had relied on genetic medicine to forcefully break through to the Xiantian realm. His combat prowess was even weaker than ordinary Xiantians. The next day, Feng Luan attended a cocktail party and happened to get to know one of the daughters of Lu's family. He even helped her get rid of a few of her pursuers. On the third day, Feng Zhuotong finally finished dealing with the matters at hand. He brought Feng Luan to meet a few old friends and participated in a competition between the younger generation of powerhouses. Therefore, Feng Luan once again shocked everyone in front of them. Not only did he defeat many of his peers, but he also displayed astonishing comprehension and managed to learn all of the seniors' ultimate techniques. Even Feng Zhuotong had a whole new level of respect for him and wanted to pass on his mantle to him instead of looking after him like a son with no future. On the fourth day, did he come into contact with Lin Yunyan here? Gunan stood outside the courtyard of the laboratory, next to a hole in a corner. It happened to be a corner of the courtyard that was not severely damaged, but the people inside could communicate with the outside world. When the people in the laboratory discovered it, Lin Yunyan was standing inside, whimpering in our direction, Three Lass said softly as she stood beside Gunan. Her voice was a little low. No matter what, Lin Yunyan was of the same race as her, and she could not help but feel touched that she had become like this. She hoped that Lin Yunyan could return to normal as soon as possible. It's because of the interaction between the God Stone and the fragment, Gunan said calmly. He knew that when Lin Yunyan's blood was stimulated, the God Stone fragment in her body was also activated, causing the other fragments nearby and even the main body of the God Stone to become active. Feng Luan probably had the main body of the God Stone in his body, and after being activated by the fragment, he was subconsciously brought over to try to communicate with Lin Yunyan. Unfortunately, Lin Yunyan was in a daze at this moment and did not communicate with him at all. However, Feng Luan, his encounter was really interesting. Sir, Three Lass couldn't help but remind Gu Nan when she saw that he had fallen silent after saying something strange. Gu Nan smiled and said, "Let's go. If nothing goes wrong, we'll be able to let Lin Yunyan advance today." Feng Lin walked along the road in boredom, but he was thinking about the girl he had met in the corner 2 days ago. When he passed by that day, the round stone in front of his chest throbbed strongly and urged him to walk inside until the girl appeared. It was a beautiful but sloppy girl. Not only was her hair messy, but she also seemed to have not changed her clothes for a long time. She didn't seem to know how to speak either, and she kept whimpering at him in the corner. Unfortunately, when he passed by again, the round stone no longer throbbed, and the girl never appeared again. After thinking about it, Feng Lin, who felt indignant, decided to go to the corner again to take a look. If the girl is still not there, why don't I climb over the wall and take a look? Feng Luan had always been bold and daring, and he had been even more so ever since the round stone mutated. He was no longer the same as he used to be. Not only had his abilities improved tremendously, but he had also learned the secret techniques passed down in his family, as well as the ultimate techniques of the other seniors. Feng Luan knew that he would have a chance of winning even if he were to fight with a level 4 or 5 innate expert. Besides, ever since he had turned over a new leaf, his father's attitude towards him had improved, and he was even more confident in supporting him. Hence, Feng Luan was very interested in climbing over the wall. However, when he ran over excitedly, he saw the person he didn't want to see the most, Gu Nan. When Feng Luan arrived, he happened to see Gu Nan standing in the corner of the wall and pondering over the damage. After a while, he turned around and walked in through the main door. Feng Luan's heart sank when he saw that. In Feng Luan's heart, Gu Nan was definitely one of the people he was afraid of. Not to mention the psychological shadow that had been left in his heart, just the fact that his father had been defeated by him in a single move showed that the other person was not on the same level as him. That girl, was he the one who had imprisoned her? Feng Luan felt as if something was clutching his heart. Why did he want to imprison her? Why did he want to imprison her here? Questions emerged in his heart one after another, making Feng Luan restless for no reason. At this time, a sudden voice came from beside him. almost causing Feng Luan to jump in fright. "Your Highness, it seems that you need our help." Feng Luan stared dumbfoundedly at the figure beside him. A man and a woman had appeared. His memory was very good now, and he had recognized the man at first glance. This person was the man he had seen on the day of the competition. He had easily defeated his opponent, and then his father and Gu Nin had fought. This guy seemed to be called Lanta. Lanta, Lansi, greet your Highness. Lanta's expression was solemn as he meticulously bowed. Feng Luan didn't have time to think and subconsciously said, "You just said that you can help me?" Chapter 90. The laboratory that Gu Nin used to house Lin Yunyun was actually not very secure. It was originally a temporary residence, because when he fed Max to Lin Yunyun, he did not expect such a result. This laboratory, located in the middle of the bustling city, gave others an opportunity to take advantage of it. Lanta quickly approached the laboratory with a curious Feng Luan and an expressionless Lan Si. At Gu Nin's request, the laboratory was very heavily guarded. Even the patrolling guards were experts above the 4th stage of the innate realm. These guys that Feng Luan thought were a bit tricky were a piece of cake for Lanta. Lanta's methods were really strange and unpredictable. Feng Luan did not even understand how he did it. He just waved his hand, and the guards fell down one by one. Lanta saw his expression and took the initiative to explain, "Your Highness, I control all the laws of water in the world. I can manipulate their blood to reverse the flow and easily knock them out." Feng Luan did not understand what "my lord" meant, but he understood the second half of the sentence. He could actually manipulate people's blood. What kind of abnormal ability was this? He was stunned for a long time before he asked doubtfully, "What do you keep calling me? Your Highness?" "Of course." Lanta bowed and said, looking at Feng Luan with eyes full of respect, "You can get the recognition of the clear water godstone, so you are my lord's god's son." Feng Luan was a little scared by his gaze, but then he was happy. There were 2 extraordinaires under his command. How could there be such a good thing in the past? This stone was really a treasure, but now he was more focused on the girl in the laboratory. He said, "The guards are all gone. I will go and have a look. You guys don't come out." "Yes, Your Highness," Lanta quickly said. Feng Luan quickly walked away. Lanta looked at his sister and saw that she was lowering her head, thinking about something. He could not help but ask in a deep voice, "Lan Si, what are you thinking about?" Lan Si, who had been silent all this time, frowned. "Brother, aren't we looking for the godstone? How can a native of the heavens be a god's son?" "What are you talking about?" Lanta immediately flew into a rage. No matter who he is, as long as he is recognized by the godstone, he will be the divine son of my lord. Lan Si gritted his teeth and did not speak. His eyes flickered with intense unwillingness. She was the possessor of a godstone fragment, and she was born with it. If she found an ownerless godstone this time, she could completely fuse it into her body. At that time, the one who would be crowned with the title of Your Highness would be her, Lan Si. But now, why would the divine stone acknowledge a native? Lanta, on the other hand, did not think that much. His thoughts were far simpler than his sister's. This stemmed from his devotion to the god of flowers. Seeing that Feng Luan's figure had already disappeared, Lanta couldn't be bothered to argue with her sister anymore. She pulled her forward and followed Feng Luan. Inside the laboratory, Gu Nin stood quietly in front of the glass window, looking at Lin Yunyun, who was floating in the air. Lin Yunyun's current cultivation base had been pushed to the peak of the innate stage, and there was still a large amount of internal breath in her body that had not been digested. After the last wave of 10 units of max, she finally reached the last straw, and the internal breath in her body reached a critical point. The vital chi that was constantly steaming overflowed and lifted her body into the air. The terrifying fluctuation of internal breath could not be isolated even by the special glass. It was like a barrel of dynamite that could explode at any time, which made everyone standing outside terrified. The only person who could remain calm at this moment was probably Gu Nin. "There are a few bugs outside," Gu Nin said all of a sudden with an inexplicable smile on his face. Third Last hurriedly said, "Sir, I'll go and kill them." "There's no need." Gu Nin stopped her and chuckled. All of you get out and seal this room. Then, run as far as you can. Perhaps it was the strangeness in Gunan's tone that made the researchers feel a chill run down their spines. They began running out of the room without saying a word. Third last was a transcendent powerhouse, after all, so she was not afraid of the terrifying internal breath in Lin Yunyun's body. Instead, Gunan's words made her feel a little depressed. "Sir, could it be?" Gunan smiled faintly and said, "The power of the fragment is hindering the evolution of her bloodline. I need someone to completely awaken the fragment, and then I'll destroy it." Feng Luan walked deeper into the laboratory, but he felt his heart getting heavier, as if something terrifying was about to happen. However, the call from the round stone was getting stronger, as if there was something in front of him that was frantically calling out to him. The girl's face suddenly appeared in Feng Luan's mind, and an inexplicable connection made him seem to see the girl floating quietly in the distance, with a figure standing next to her. "It's him." Feng Luan stopped in his tracks, and he suddenly felt a sense of fear. Fortunately, a voice sounded beside him. "Your Highness, are you worried about that Gunan?" Feng Luan turned around, and Lan Ta and his sister were already standing next to him. Hence, he took a deep breath and said, "That Gunan, are you confident that you can deal with him?" Gunan? Lan Ta knew Gunan too, but he did not know him in detail. He only knew that he was a local powerhouse. However, he was the apostle of the god of flowers. How could he be afraid of a local from the heavenly world? He was not a disciple of the realm lord. Hence, Lan Ta said decisively, "Don't worry, Your Highness. I'm confident that I can lure him away or kill him." "All right." Feng Luan finally nodded and made up his mind to walk forward. The researchers who kept running out of the laboratory became the best signposts for the three of them. They rushed there as fast as they could, and by then, the terrifying aura on Lin Yunyun could no longer be concealed. The simple lockdown of the laboratory could not stop the three of them at all, and Feng Luan felt increasingly depressed. "There seems to be something bad in front," he could not help but say, because he realized that the feeling was also coming from the round stone. There seemed to be something wrong with the stone. It was calling him forward, and, at the same time, it was warning him. What exactly was in front? "Don't worry, Your Highness," Lan Ta comforted him. "If it's just Gunan, I can at least protect your safety." As he spoke, he suddenly stretched out a hand and pushed forward gently. An invisible wave rose. In Feng Luan's vision, there seemed to be an invisible wave that crashed into the wall of the laboratory in front. But it was this invisible wave that actually had a power that left people speechless. Boom! The wall of the laboratory, which had been reinforced many times, was hit by this wave and collapsed. The wall of the laboratory shattered, and Feng Luan and the other two finally saw the scene inside. Chapter 91. Feng Luan looked at the scene in front of him, but he had no intention of talking to Gunan. All his attention was attracted by Lin Yunyun. To be precise, it was the green light that was constantly emitting from between Lin Yunyun's eyebrows. The blue round stone in front of Feng Luan's chest also began to glow and float slowly. The god's stone fragment. Lan Ta blurted out in surprise. He quickly turned to Feng Luan and said, "Your Highness, your clear water god stone is still missing 3 fragments. That girl is the natural carrier of the fragments and also your natural servant." "My servant?" Feng Luan asked in confusion. "That's right. Her power was given by the god stone, so she's naturally your most loyal servant." Feng Luan's eyes lit up. "Then what should I do?" "You just have to get close to her and completely awaken the fragments in her body," Lan Ta said while looking at Gunan. "Please leave this person to me." He stood in front of Gunan with a straight face, ready to attack as soon as the latter made a move. However, Gunan merely smiled faintly and did not seem to have any intention of attacking at all. That made him feel puzzled. On the other hand, he had already ignored the 3 tails behind Gunan. Feng Luan was delighted to see that Gunan did not make a move, so he hurriedly walked forward. Indeed, with every step he took, he saw that the light between the girl's eyebrows became more intense, and the throbbing of the round stone in front of his chest became more obvious. The existence of the Godstone fragment made him feel a natural sense of familiarity with the girl in front of him. Besides, Lonta had also told him that the girl would be his servant. Servant. TSK, TSK. Young Master Feng, who used to be a playboy, could not help but feel excited. By the time he walked in front of Lin Yunyun, the green light between Lin Yunyun's eyebrows had already completely lit up, and it even seemed like it was going to leave her body. Feng Luan subconsciously reached out to grab it, and the green light seemed to have taken the initiative to cooperate with him. It suddenly jumped up from Lin Yunyun's forehead and was about to jump into Feng Luan's hand. That's it. Feng Luan heard 4 cold words. That familiar voice made him feel as if he had fallen into an ice house. Before Feng Luan could react, a hand grabbed the green light. Feng Luan felt a familiar gust of wind, just like that day. Bang! The giant shadow hand appeared again, and history seemed to be repeating itself. Young Master Feng didn't even get a chance to grunt before he was sent flying. Of course, he didn't suffer a heavy injury this time because Lonta had finally reacted and caught him firmly. "Your Highness, are you all right?" Lonta's dark face was slightly red. Gunnan's speed was too fast for him to react. Feng Luan seemed to have reached the most critical juncture and was interrupted by someone. He angrily said, "Didn't you say that you could stop him? Trash. All of you are trash." "What did you say?" Lan Si was not convinced in his heart. Hearing his brother being scolded, he could not help but speak up. The embarrassment on Lan Ta's face became even more obvious. He stopped his sister with a look and said in a low voice, "It's my fault. Your Highness, please give me a chance to redeem myself." "Why wouldn't I give you a chance? If you have the ability, go and kill him." Feng Luan was about to go crazy with anger. "Okay." Lonta nodded solemnly. As the 3 of them spoke, Gunnan played with the Godstone fragment in his hand, a look of interest on his face. To be honest, he had killed many gods in his previous life and dug out their godhoods. However, this was the first time he had seen such a damaged natural godhood. Natural godhood was too rare, and the conditions for its birth were extremely harsh. Artificially cultivating, it was even more troublesome than directly killing a god. Thus, in his previous life, no player had done such a thing. Seeing his actions, Lonta flew into a rage and said, "Scoundrel, put down the Godstone fragment immediately. Otherwise, the wrath of my master will swoosh." His voice reminded Gunnan, so the latter raised his hand and slashed. Blood flashed. Lonta's words were blocked, and his face was about to turn red. However, he had no choice but to raise his hand and summon a blue light shield. The blade fell, but it was blocked firmly by the shield. It did not even make a splash. This was the first time since Gunnan's Bloodblade had appeared in the world that he had returned without achieving anything. Lonta sneered. "This is a divine skill bestowed by my master. How could a mortal like you break through it?" The corner of Gunnan's mouth curled up in a mocking smile. However, his movements were not slow, and he slashed 9 times in a row. It was worth mentioning that each of his 9 slashes was in a different position. It seemed to be intentional. At the beginning, these 9 slashes were as useless as the first slash. However, the second slash began to make the shield tremble slightly. Every subsequent slash caused the shield to tremble more intensely, until finally it shattered with a loud bang. Lonta watched all of this, dumbfounded. He could clearly see that every slash of his opponent landed on the divine power nodes of the divine skill. Because the divine skill was bestowed by the gods and not his own power, he could not adjust it. Lonta's divine power was instantly destroyed. It surged wildly in his body, and he could not control it at all. This is impossible," Lonta said with difficulty as he felt the chaotic divine power in his body. The next moment, Gunnan's blade had already pierced into his abdomen. He then grinned. "Nothing is impossible. I'm more familiar with Lorenz's divine skills than you are." "Brother!" His sister's heart-wrenching cries rang in his ears, but Lonta's vision gradually blurred. He had not even dreamed that he would be killed by a simple divine skill that he had yet to use. His divine power had been destroyed, and he had been killed by a simple divine skill. "I still have more than 10 powerful divine skills, and I still have the grace of the Mother Goddess. I still have several divine tools that can preserve my life. Unfortunately, without divine power, the gods' messengers were useless. After stabbing Lan Ta to death, Gunan only curled his lips, his expression indifferent. In the game in his previous life, God's messengers were also a very unique type of monster. On one hand, they were strong and had all kinds of divine skills. On the other hand, their skills were very rigid and far less flexible than normal 3rd or 4th grade ones. Thus, the most efficient way to kill God's messengers was to trick them into using a defensive divine skill and then target them to disperse their divine power. Against the enemy, of course, one had to find a way to kill them in one blow. The idea of waiting for the enemy to unleash their ultimate move before fighting to the death was truly idiotic. Gunan slowly shifted his gaze back to Lan Si and Feng Lun. Lan Si's face was already covered in tears. She screamed and rushed forward, but Gunan casually grabbed her by the neck and pressed her to the ground. After being stunned for 3 seconds, Feng Lun suddenly let out a strange cry and rushed out without a care for his life. Gunan did not chase after him. He still had use for Feng Lun. This young Master Feng was the best target to lure out the other fragments. If he had the God Stone, few people would dare to attack. When Feng Lun's figure disappeared, Gunan slowly bent down and grabbed Lan Si's hair, a strange smile on his face. Chapter 92. The smell of blood filled the laboratory. Without the suppression of the God Stone fragment, the internal energy in Lin Yunyun's body began to stabilize and transform her body continuously. 3 Last was standing beside her, helping her to calm down the true chi. On the other hand, Gunan stood in front of Lan Si and looked down at her. Dream on. Lan Si was like an enraged lioness as she glared at Gunan and roared maniacally. You damned heretic! My lord will punish you and make you fall into the abyss forever. The young girl cursed Gunan with her most vicious words. After all, she just thought that the natives of the heavenly world were not qualified to be recognized by the God Stone, but it did not mean that her faith was not firm. As someone who grew up in the Kingdom of Flowers, Lan Si was also a fanatic believer of the God of Flowers. Fall into the abyss forever? Lorenza herself can only go down to the 50th level of the abyss. Anything further than that is beyond the reach of your Mother Goddess. Gunan pursed his lips and chuckled. Lorenza was the name of the God of Flowers. Lan Si finally realized that something was wrong after Gunan mentioned her twice. Why does this native know the name of Mother Goddess? However, Gunan did not give her a chance to ask questions. He pressed his hand on her head and knocked her out under the power of shadows. It was basically impossible to instigate such a fanatic believer with words. He could only rely on some special means or find a weakness in her heart. Fortunately, Lan Si had a weakness in front of Gunan. Look after her and don't let her commit suicide. Gunan tossed the young girl to 3 Last and walked towards Lin Yunyun. Strictly speaking, the current Lin Yunyun was no longer of much use to Gunan. The God Stone fragment hidden in her body had been removed, and there was no longer anything that could hinder her evolution. However, she had nothing to do with Gunan anymore. In gaming terms, the chain of quests for the NPC Lin Yunyun had already been completed by Gunan. Now, Gunan would still pay attention to her, but it was just a habit. After losing the God Stone fragment, Lin Yunyun's evolution speed was very fast. In a very short time, her inner breath had been completely restrained, which in turn promoted the evolution of her divine soul. After a moment, she slowly opened her eyes. They were no longer as beastly as before. Instead, they were as clear as before. Uncle! The first thing she saw was Gunan's calm face. Lin Yunyun felt as if she had just had a dream, a very, very long dream. She could barely remember the scenes in the dream, but there was one scene that was unusually clear. A ray of green light floated out from his body and was about to approach the other ball of green light before being completely engulfed by it. She could clearly feel that the green light was still controlling her body at that time. If the green light was devoured, then she would probably be controlled by someone else for the rest of her life. However, at that moment, The green light was grabbed by a hand, and the connection between it and her was instantly cut off. "Uncle, what exactly is this?" Lin Yunyun hugged her knees and sat beside Gu Nin while watching him play with the green fragment in his hand. The fragment looked ordinary, just like the broken glass that could be seen everywhere on the street. However, such an item had caused her to suffer for many years, and she couldn't even advance in strength. "It's something that can be eaten. There should be a total of 3 such fragments. One is with you, one is with Lan Si, and the last one has to come out on its own," Gunan explained casually. With a peculiar expression, Third Last said, "Lord, I think I've seen this thing before." Oh, indeed, Third Last had seen something similar before. Even though it looked different, the extremely special and majestic aura it exuded was something that she could never forget. "It's actually in Qin Xuanji's hands." After hearing Third Last's answer, Gunan suddenly felt helpless. If he had known this would happen, he would have snatched it from Qin Xuanji. That way, he wouldn't have to deliberately let Feng Luan go and lure the last fragment out. Seeing Gunan's expression, Third Last said solemnly, "Lord, please don't underestimate Qin Xuanji and the Bloodline Alliance behind her. There are world breakers among them." "What's the Bloodline Alliance?" Gunan asked with raised eyebrows. He wasn't too afraid of the so-called world breakers, but he was more or less curious about those who might correspond to level 4 abilities. The power system in this world was essentially similar to that in the game. Hence, according to the model of the game, world breakers should have already dug deep into the core skills and derived their own exclusive rules and skills. Yes, unlike buying skills at level 3, what players had to do from level 4 onwards was far from ordinary online games. Level 4 actually required players to build their own skills. One could choose to build the simplest skills to quickly break through to level 5, but that would inevitably lower the upper limit of one's power in the future. One could also choose the most complicated skills, but that would inevitably slow down one's leveling speed. There were even some skills that players couldn't understand at all. It was just asking for trouble. If one had a good grasp of these things, that would be the most important thing. In comparison, the natives here had an advantage in this aspect. They could spend decades researching and building rules, but the players didn't have that kind of time. Gunan recalled the overview of level 4 in his mind, and Third Last was also talking about the situation of the Bloodline Alliance. The Bloodline is a very large group. Our headquarters is in the Central Star area, and the 6-star area has been the main development area of the Alliance for the past 200 years. Third Last tried to use simple words to let Gunan understand what kind of existence the Bloodline Alliance was, their origin, background, and the area they could influence. The simplest way to describe them was that they were huge. In the entire Bloodline Alliance, there were at least 3 world breakers, and, at any time, one of them would be in the Central Star area headquarters. In the 6-star area, which was an important target, its power was also very large. There were close to 10 elites at the level of Weidong High. What surprised Gunan the most was that Third Last had received orders from the higher-ups to contact Qin Xuanji to monitor the White Mist organization. However, it turned out that the organization was also a member of the Bloodline Alliance. Now, he remembered that Lan Marigold had said that she had helped him contact a Bloodline reincarnation organization. "So, why are you following me?" Gunan finally asked this question. He didn't really care about it, but he wanted to know the answer. Chapter 93. There would definitely be factional strife within any large organization, as well as endless internal friction. There would also be situations where members disliked each other and were even hostile to each other. There were also various organizations in the Bloodline Alliance, but there was no enmity between them. On the contrary, they shared the same origin, which allowed them to exchange resources better. Instead, there was a conflict that stemmed from the bloodline that directly divided all the bloodlines into 2 camps. The conflict was very simple, and that was the difference between natural bloodlines and inherited bloodlines. For example, Three Tails and Lin Yunyun were born as bloodlines, but their bloodlines had not manifested before, so they looked just like ordinary people. As long as their abilities progressed to a certain level, or through special catalysis, they would be able to awaken their bloodlines. However, there was also another type of bloodline who were just ordinary humans in the beginning. They inherited the ancient bloodline into their bodies through some means, and thus became bloodlines. Take Qin Xuanji, for example. She was originally just an ordinary person in the Langya world, and she only managed to snatch the inheritance of the bloodline from a group of people after a series of cruel battles. The two types of people looked down on each other. One side felt that the other was a bastard, while the other side felt that the other was just a sheep that could not withstand the test of blood. Three Tails was an extreme supporter of the bloodline. Ever since the old master left, there have been more and more bastards in the organization. This time, they would rather give such an important mission to Qin Xuanji and let her come all the way from the 6-star domain. She gritted her teeth and said fiercely, "So that's the trigger." Gunan nodded and said, "In that case, the White Mist is an organization of bloodline innate organizations?" "That's right. The two commanders of the White Mist are almost pure-blooded blood descendants. Besides, they maintain the ancient tradition of only recruiting bloodline innate humans and humans. The bloodline innate humans looked down on bastards, but they did not have much prejudice against humans. After all, there are many powerhouses among humans, and they could even be considered the true rulers of the universe. It was just like how the orcs despised the half-beastmen, but they treated humans as equals. After figuring out Three Last's motive, Gunan didn't say anything else and simply asked her to guide Lin Yunyun to quickly familiarize herself with her power. With Gunan's current strength and status, he indeed needed some people to order around. He couldn't do everything himself. In a hidden cave, Qin Xuanji drew a mysterious magic circle. Then, she used a knife to cut her arm. Blood immediately flowed out and dripped onto the ground. The blood continued to drip down and flowed into the formation along the vein patterns. The formation gradually emitted a faint glow. After a while, the blood had completely turned light blue, and a figure began to appear on the spell formation. This figure was wrapped in armor and held a giant flail in his right hand. He looked extremely terrifying. "Qin Xuanji, you know the price of interstellar communication. I hope you bring good news." The armored figure spoke slowly. His voice was extremely strange, as if it was hidden inside the armor. However, it seemed to be able to reach the bottom of one's heart without leaking out at all. Just this ability alone was equivalent to a permanent sound transmission technique. The power of this armored figure had already reached a shocking level. Qin Xuanji knelt on one knee and maintained a calm expression, but there was also a hint of respect. "Yes, Your Excellency, the King of the Deep Sea. I found the whereabouts of the water barrier stone, but there are others who have their eyes on it too," she said in her usual deep voice. Feng Luan's actions during this period of time couldn't be hidden from others. Besides, he had never thought of hiding the God's Stone, so it wouldn't be difficult for Qin Xuanji to find him. Feng Zhuotong was not difficult to deal with, but Qin Xuanji had also seen Feng Luan's experience in the past few days. The siblings, Lan Ta and Lan Si, followed Feng Luan, but after entering the laboratory, only Feng Luan escaped in a panic. This made Qin Xuanji uncertain. She knew who the owner of the laboratory was as soon as she checked. It was Gunan again. Qin Xuanji had no confidence in dealing with a freak like Gunan, so she bypassed the people in the Deep Sea bloodline and went directly to the King of the Deep Sea. The King of the Deep Sea was one of the world breakers among the blood descendants and the true master of the Deep Sea bloodline. The armored man, the King of the Deep Sea, laughed when he heard this. "Good. Immediately start to snatch the water barrier stone. If anyone dares to interfere, kill them." As soon as he finished speaking, Qin Xuanji saw the shoulder of the King of the Deep Sea light up, and a badge slowly fell into her hand. It was the epaulette of the King of the Deep Sea. Qin Xuanji couldn't help but be pleasantly surprised. "Thank you, Your Excellency." She had an extraordinary understanding of the power of the World Breakers. Although the World Breakers were in the Central System, it was not difficult for them to descend their power here. Even the best among the Transcendents like Wei Donghai had the power to cross the system to attack, let alone the World Breakers. The word world breakers, meant that they had the power to break the astral world and even go outside the astral world. Feng Luan was in a bad mood for the past 2 days. Even if the round stone in front of his chest was getting stronger and stronger, and it helped him more and more, it couldn't alleviate his anxiety. Lan Tao was killed by Gu Nin almost immediately, and the green light on the girl was about to fall into his hands, but it was blocked by Gu Nan. This kind of experience was not something that made people happy. Why? Why is it always that guy? Young Master Feng kept roaring in his heart, but his anger didn't go to his head. He knew that he was in danger. The opponent had killed Lan Ta, but he let him go. Who would believe that it wasn't a conspiracy? Young Master Feng was just a playboy, but he wasn't an idiot. Feng Luan felt as if there was a giant net that was shrinking in a place he couldn't see. It was waiting for all the prey to be in position. Then it would close and suffocate him. No, I have to find Dad. I have to leave this damn place. Young Master Feng hesitated for a long time before he made up his mind. He had to get out of there. He believed returning to the sixth system was the only way he could escape Gu Nan's clutches. Young Master, the Mister has something to ask of you. A servant's voice came from the door. Feng Luan didn't think too much about it. He was going to find his father anyway. So he said, "Wait, I'm coming." However, the moment he opened the door, he felt a chill in his heart. In his house, the servants always called his father Mister. Why had they changed it today? While he was hesitating, he felt a power come from in front of him. 2 black-clothed men were standing in the doorway. They pushed the door open. Feng Luan quickly took 2 steps back and shouted, Who are you?" Chapter 94. Deep into the night, Feng Luan was frantically fleeing through the streets and alleys. There was a wound on the right side of his face, and blood was slowly dripping down his cheek. He looked abnormally disheveled, completely unlike the usual young Master Feng. Damn it! Feng Luan cursed fiercely. He raised his hand to wipe the blood off his face, but accidentally touched the wound, causing him to grimace in pain. Those 2 fellows. Fortunately, I'm not the same as before. Otherwise, I would have been in danger today. Feng Luan confirmed that there was no danger around him, so he simply ran to the side and sat down. He exhaled heavily. Those 2 black-clothed men were at least innate level 6. If he had been the same as before, he would have been knocked down in a single encounter. Fortunately, the round stone had increased his strength, and he had learned a few secret techniques. That was how he had managed to escape with his life. I have to find my father as soon as possible. Feng Luan immediately made a decision after catching his breath. He had long since used the item that Feng Zhuotang had given him to ask for help, but he had not received any response. At that time, Feng Luan knew that something had probably happened to his father. Who the hell are you? Feng Zhuotang's face was gloomy. His heart sank as he looked at the black-clothed men surrounding him. He did not know what kind of enemies he had in the 66 Amaterasu that would be enough to send out such a lineup. There were already 3 extraordinaires, 1 eternal domain realm, and 2 nuance realm experts. Such a combination was enough to wipe out some medium-sized forces. Lord Feng, do you still not understand? Qin Xuanji slowly walked out from the side and said coldly, Your son took something he shouldn't have. It's you. Feng Zhuotang stared at her coldly. I knew that you approached Feng Luan with no good intentions. Although the truth was that Feng Luan was pestering her, Qin Xuanji did not bother to explain anything. She said to the person beside her, Mr. Yu, sorry to trouble you. It's a small matter. The Eternal Domain Realm Extraordinaire, the black-clothed man who had been silent all along, said indifferently. The indifference in his tone made Feng Zhuotang's heart flash with a trace of anger. Even in such a situation, were they so sure that he had no way to fight back? However, in the next moment, he understood why she was so certain. Mr. Yu slowly took a step forward, and the black cloak on his head naturally slid down, revealing the face of a young man with a silver mask on his face. Others might not feel much about this image, but Feng Zhuotang felt his scalp go numb. You are Yu Qianlong? Mr. Yu paused and smiled. I didn't expect someone to remember my name, even though I haven't been in the world for 20 years. Feng Zhuotang's heart turned cold not only because of the identity of the person in front of him, but also because of the power he represented. Yu Qianling was a very famous Hong area elite in the Sixth System. He was a super genius of the Blood People Alliance. Back in the day, he was said to be one of the people most likely to break the world. However, after the Great Battle 20 years ago, there was no news of him. Even Feng Zhuotong thought he was dead. But he never thought that he would appear in the Nine-Star region and help Qin Xuanji fight against him. Even 20 years ago, Yu Qianling was strong enough to suppress him. Now, he was not a break-world god, but he was at least a path master. Feng Zhuotong did not have time to think. He chose to strike first instead of running away. He knew he was a swordsman. The path of a swordsman was the path of attack. If he used a knife to break the situation, he might be able to live. Running away was a dead end. Yu Qianling's lips lifted. He raised his hand and blocked the tip of Feng Zhuotong's knife. When the knife light came down, the scene in Feng Zhuotong's eyes suddenly changed. It was like a bright moon was hanging in the sky, and everything in the world was reflected in it. In the next moment, the same knife light came out of Yu Qianling's hand. It slashed Feng Zhuotong's forehead. He flew away and landed on the ground. Moon of time, reflect the world. Yu Qianling's voice sounded coldly. He looked at his opponent on the ground and said, "You cannot understand my rules. You will lose." Feng Zhuotong was not completely dead. He tried to get up, but he failed a few times. "It really is the power of a path master, Dad." An exclamation came from the side. It was Feng Luan. He had arrived just in time to see Feng Zhuotong get hit by the knife and fall to the ground. Feng Zhuotong, who looked like he was on the verge of death, suddenly got up and rushed to Feng Luan's side. He grabbed his shoulder and started running. "Go!" Feng Zhuotong shouted. Feng Luan did not even have time to react before he was carried away by his father. Feng Zhuotong's speed was much faster than before. Clearly, he had used some kind of secret technique. Perhaps he wanted to take this opportunity to escape or at least send his son away. But in the next moment, a figure blocked his way. This person was dressed in a white robe. He was holding a black long sword in his hand. However, Feng Zhuotong was pleasantly surprised. "Mr. Gu, please help me." Feng Zhuotong looked like he had seen a life-saving straw. He hurriedly said, "As long as you keep my son alive." A sword light flashed. Feng Luan, who was standing behind Feng Zhuotong, only felt his vision blur. The black tip of the sword had already pierced through his father's throat, through his spine, and out of his body. Feng Zhuotong looked at Gu Nan in a daze, as if he could not believe that Gu Nan had acted so decisively. Gu Nan casually tossed this eternal domain expert's corpse to the side, revealing young Master Feng Luan behind him. Feng Luan looked at the expressionless Gu Nan. The cold aura behind him was also closing in. At the critical moment of life and death, he actually made the right choice. He pulled the blue round stone from his chest and threw it to the side. Then, he ran in the opposite direction. This was indeed a smart move. Anyone present could easily kill him. However, if the God Stone was not in his hands, no one would be interested in him. Gu Nan instantly appeared beside the God Stone. At the same time, a ray of moonlight descended. The moonlight shone on Gu Nan's body. It was like some kind of extremely corrosive ray trying to drill into his body. Unfortunately, Gu Nan's strongest point was his body. The moonlight could not even penetrate his skin. It was forcefully blocked outside, and the God Stone successfully fell into his hands. Yu Qianling frowned slightly. The threat that this new enemy brought to him seemed to be stronger than Feng Zhuotong's. Qin Xuanji also said beside him, "Mr. Yu, he is Gu Nan." Oh, Yu Qianling's gaze was still indifferent. No one could see his expression under the mask. Chapter 95. The main body of the God Stone was in his hands, but Gu Nan did not seem too excited. In his gaming career, he had received many good things. It was just a low-level God Stone, so it was not enough to move him. Yu Qianling's eyes froze. He was going to strike, but Qin Xuanji stopped him. "Mr. Yu, please wait." Qin Xuanji quietly said, "I am friends with him. If we can solve this peacefully, that would be great." Yu Qianling thought about it and nodded. The stronger a person was, the more they cared about their lives. They would not be like the thugs on the street, who would fight over a disagreement. Plus, Yu Qianling was only there to help. It was questionable whether or not he would fight. So, before the two of them fought, Qin Xuanji tried to make peace. Gunan, the World Stone is a treasure, but it only works for break-world elites. If you are willing to trade it, we will be able to satisfy you. Qin Xuanji's negotiation was very skillful. She pointed out that the World Stone was useless to Gunan. She also hinted that she had a break-world elite backing her up. It was a shame that Gunan needed the Godstone for himself. He did not care about what she meant. To players, friends, or enemies depended on the mission. If they got in the way of doing missions and leveling up, they were enemies. Therefore, in the next moment, Gunan's crimson saber suddenly appeared in his hand. With the support of shadow energy, he beheaded Qin Xuanji at an unimaginable speed and directly chopped off her head. The head was separated from the body. Qin Xuanji's face was still in shock. Gunan didn't even bother to look at the head that had flown out. He caught the headless corpse and took out Qin Xuanji's green crystal precisely. The core of the crystal was the last piece of the Godstone. The people of the Bloodman Alliance used a special method to seal it. Yu Qianling coldly laughed. Miss Qin, it looks like they do not want to be friends with you. Qin Xuanji's severed head had somehow floated to his side. There was a helpless expression on her face. Since that's the case, please make your move, mister. Gunan glanced in that direction. The life force of a bloodline carrier is truly vigorous. Of course, he could see that Qin Xuanji was relying purely on her astonishing vitality to maintain her will. If he returned her body to her, it wouldn't take long for it to heal itself. Just like himself, under the effect of the blood saber, half of his neck was broken, but it was already healing at a crazy speed. Cut the crap. Let me see what's so special about a 19-year-old eternal domain cultivator. Yu Qianling's eyes flashed with a strange light, but he had no intention of attacking immediately. He sensed danger from Gunan's previous attack. Gunan's gaze also swept across Yu Qianling. The feeling Shifeng got from this person was similar to Wei Donghai's. He was a character who had comprehended the skill's profundity and was only one step away from reaching Tier 4. It was just that previously, it was just Wei Donghai's clone. Now it was his main body. He didn't think too much about it. He raised his hand and slashed, as if he hadn't seen the previous battle. Yu Qianling sneered. Just like how he dealt with Feng Zhuotong just now, he raised one hand high. A faint light began to flicker in his palm, and an inexplicable concept appeared. Moon of Time. Reflection. The corner of Gunan's mouth curled up slightly. He suddenly put away the blood saber in his hand and punched with his left hand. Yu Qianling was slightly stunned. He subconsciously raised his hand to meet the attack. The terrifying force smashed into the moonlight. Gunan suffered the same amount of recoil, but he still stood firm. Yu Qianling, on the other hand, retreated 3 steps. Show me again? Gunan had a disdainful smile on his face. He was also very familiar with the nature of the power of the moon. Relying on its extremely high level, it could reflect most of the rules in the world. However, it wasn't without weaknesses. The most direct one was that it was helpless against pure violence. Gunan's fist did not carry any rules. It was just a strange force. At such a time, no matter how strong the power of the moon was, it was no different from a wall. Boom, 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 boom. Another 4 consecutive punches landed. Every single punch caused the ground beneath Yu Qianling's feet to explode. Clearly, the latter was trying to divert the force and was unwilling to bear Gunan's strange force. Although the power of the moon could reflect rules, it couldn't directly erase the force. After suffering a few punches, Yu Qianling finally realized that he couldn't continue fighting like this. He leaped backward abruptly, distancing himself from Gunan. He formed a mysterious seal with both hands and pushed it forward gently. A new moon attacked Gunan. However, Gunan didn't even have the intention to dodge. He allowed the new moon to slash his body, leaving a bloody wound. However, a short 3 seconds later, the wound began to recover rapidly. It couldn't stop Gunan at all. The corner of Yu Qianling's mouth twitched. He hesitated for a moment. Gunan's arrogant actions made him a little annoyed. However, rationality won out in the end. He had no feud with the other party. Why was there a need to fight to the death? The Alliance couldn't find trouble with him over such a matter. However, before he could finish his thoughts, a terrifying and majestic aura suddenly rose. Even Gu Nan was slightly shocked. However, this aura came too suddenly and inexplicably. It was almost at his back in an instant. He didn't even have time to turn around. From Yu Qianling's angle, he could see that Qin Xuanji had already stood up. She was pressing her head with one hand and holding an epaulette with the other. That's the aura of the king of the deep sea. Yu Qianling was knowledgeable after all. He recognized the technique of this big shot at a glance. The shadow of an armor appeared from the epaulette. A giant hand suddenly slapped down on Gu Nan. Unparalleled power and majestic rule aura. This was the combination of Gu Nan and Yu Qianling. The power of one palm made Yu Qianling feel invincible. Gu Nan's feeling was much simpler. It really is level 4 power. He knew that the other party had a backup plan, but he didn't expect it to come so quickly and so fiercely. At such a critical moment, he didn't have time to think. He could only put his hands behind his head and bend his body slightly. Shadow power crazily protected his back. Bang! The palm of the king of the deep sea's shadow slapped Gu Nan to the ground. Even the ground that was covered by the palm was pressed down by 2 meters. One could see how terrifying that palm was. Qin Xuanji slowly walked over and met up with Yu Qianling. The way the latter looked at her was different. He originally thought that she was just a normal member of the Alliance. He didn't expect her to be bestowed by the king of the deep sea. People who could talk directly to a break-world big shot were not easy to deal with. Moreover, Qin Xuanji had such a technique, but she wanted to attack first. She wanted to choose the best time to attack. She had to kill Gu Nan in one hit. Thinking about this, Yu Qianling couldn't help but sigh. This Gu Nan didn't die in vain. Chapter 96. Hearing Qin Xuanji's voice, Yu Qianling looked at the sunken ground in shock. For what he could sense, there were no longer any signs of life in this deep pit. How can anyone still be alive? However, he quickly understood what Qin Xuanji meant. There was no sign of Gu Nan in the area suppressed by the king of the deep sea shadow. Did he run away after being hit by that palm? Or was he not hit at all? This thought flashed across their minds. Yu Qianling was slightly better. He was just unwilling to fight to the death with Gu Nan, not afraid of him. Qin Xuanji, on the other hand, felt a strong sense of danger and turned to leave. The king of the deep sea's epaulette had completely disappeared after being used once. She did not want to be attacked by Gu Nan again. The next moment, a cold aura pierced through the night sky. Qin Xuanji stopped in her tracks and felt a sharp pain in her abdomen. She looked down subconsciously, only to find that her abdomen had been completely pierced. That was where her life essence was. Her strength was starting to leak out. An indescribable fear surfaced in her heart. Yu Qianling appeared by her side immediately. The silver moonlight instantly filled the surroundings, but there was no trace of Gu Nan. Under the night sky, in an ordinary residential area, there were no pedestrians on the road. Occasionally, a hover car drove by, causing a few dogs to bark. A father and daughter walked into the residential area and took the elevator up to the 22nd floor. For a residential area with 50 to 60 floors, this floor was considered very expensive. "Daddy, I'm so hungry. I want to eat dumplings." The little girl stood at the door of her house and began to mumble. "All right, Daddy will cook dumplings for you later." The father patted her head lovingly and took out his keys to open the door. He entered the door and turned on the lights as usual. He did not sense anything amiss. Only when the lights came on did he suddenly realize that a person covered in blood was sitting on the sofa in his house. His head was lowered, and his spine seemed to have suffered a heavy blow. There was an obvious dent in it. His back was covered in blood, staining his white robe bright red. The blood was even seeping to the front of his body. One of his arms was completely broken. His elbow joints were broken, and his forearm was folded in front of his body. It was a sight that made people's hair stand on end. The strangest thing was that this person's gaze was incomparably calm, as if the person who was so heavily injured wasn't him. His appearance was too terrifying. Not only did the little girl scream in fright, but even her father took 2 steps back and hurriedly shielded his daughter behind him. Who are you?" he asked, suppressing the fear in his heart. The strange man didn't say a word and just stared straight ahead. He didn't even breathe. Only the sound of blood dripping indicated that everything before him wasn't an illusion. Was he already dead? Her father could not help but think this way. Instead, the little girl suddenly revealed an excited expression. "Daddy, he must be a peerless expert who is being hunted down, just like in the novels." As she spoke, she actually wanted to run to the front, but her father hurriedly stopped her. The strange man still did not react, not even his eyelids twitching. Seeing that this person didn't seem to be moving, or that he was already dead, her father mustered up his courage and said, "Hey, if you're still alive, make a sound." The reply he got was still silence. Just as he was getting impatient, a strange phenomenon appeared. Half of the man's neck was broken, and his spine was gradually recovering. Even his damaged muscles and skin were slowly recovering. Her father suddenly felt his hands and feet turn cold. Not only was this person alive, but his injuries were also automatically recovering. "Go, come with Daddy." He picked up his daughter and quickly ran towards the door. He had made up his mind to immediately call the police after leaving the house. It was better to leave such a terrifying person to the police. The next moment, a shadow flashed across the ground. This father's entire body was cut in half at the waist, and his upper body slowly slid down. The little girl screamed again, but this time she was sobbing, and her voice was also filled with fear. The neck of the person in white on the sofa gradually returned to normal. He then stood up and moved his limbs. One of his hands was still broken, and when he moved, it was like a prosthetic limb dangling from his shoulder. This person was, of course, Gunan. "He's really badly injured," he muttered, somewhat speechless. His luck is too bad, and he just happened to meet a level 4 physical strength type. His demon god body was not afraid of most attacks at the level of rules, but when faced with pure strength, he could only take it head-on. The attack from the Deep Sea King's shadow had almost destroyed all of Gunan's vitality. Fortunately, passivation reduced most of the damage, giving him a chance to escape. But even in that state, he still turned around and gave Qin Xuanji a fatal blow. Bloodline carrier. So that's what it is. Thinking of the scene when he pierced through Qin Xuanji's abdomen, Gunan could not help but smile coldly. Previously, Qin Xuanji's terrifying vitality had indeed surprised him. That kind of physique was almost comparable to his demon god body. But under the observer's eyepiece, he still noticed some clues. Unlike his demon god body, physique was strengthened in every part of the body. There was a core in the body of a bloodline carrier, and their vitality was emitted from there. Once this core was destroyed, the bloodline carrier would lose the source of power, which was the foundation of their bloodline power. Piercing through Qin Xuanji's bloodline core was enough to make her lose the ability to fight for a long time, and naturally, she would not be able to organize people to chase after him. As expected of level 4 strength, even the effect of Dawn's praise is suppressed. Gunan looked at the injuries on his body that were slowly recovering and could not help but frown. The attack from the Deep Sea King had not only caused him terrifying injuries, but the remaining rule power was also suppressing his self-recovery ability. The injuries that could have been healed in a few days would now need at least a month, and it also depended on how fast the level 4 rule power dissipated. But if I can absorb the power of the God Stone and increase my sin value to more than 300, the suppression effect of the level 4 power will be greatly reduced. Gunan had a very thorough understanding of the rules of the game. In the Evil God game, there was a situation of level suppression, which was reflected by one's rank. As long as his core skill reached the level of esoteric, the level suppression would not be as severe. I'll wait for another 2 days, and when my strength has recovered to level 3, I'll go and find Lan Si. Gunan gently clenched his fists, feeling the power in his body, and made up his mind. His current strength was probably not even comparable to an ordinary level 3. If Lan Si resisted, The outcome would be hard to say. Moreover, if he appeared with this appearance, it was unknown whether Three Tails would still be loyal. Gunan had never trusted any of these NPCs. Chapter 97. Just as Gunan was temporarily dormant and recuperating from his injuries, his disappearance caused many people and many things to change in the 66 Amaterasu. In a single night, the news of Star's ranker Feng Zhuotang's death and Gunan's disappearance had spread throughout the entire 66 Amaterasu. Even the endless sea of stars, these two were considered experts. For something like this to happen to them on the same day, it was truly thought-provoking. Madame Lu 7, who came from the 6-star region, immediately issued an order to search for the whereabouts of Feng Zhuotang's orphan, Feng Lun. As for the local Lu's family's Lu Yiming, he didn't express any opinion on Gunan's disappearance. Within the Lu's family, Lu Xinyu had a vexed expression as she walked out of Lu Yiming's room. She had requested for a large number of manpower from her grandfather to search for Gunan's whereabouts, but Lu Yiming had rejected it. The true ruler of the Lu's family didn't even give a reasonable reason and merely asked Lu Xinyu to calm down. "Sister, calm down," Lan Marigold advised her. "For a person like Gunan, as long as we haven't seen his corpse, there is no need to be anxious." Bai Wu and the others had also heard of the news of Gunan's disappearance, and they had even more detailed information. The Alliance made a move. Elder Qin said with a solemn expression, "Lord Yu Qinling personally made a move, and Feng Zhuotang had no chance of survival. Gunan, perhaps he escaped with severe injuries." Li Leo said, "If he died in the hands of Lord Yu, there is no reason not to leave his corpse." Wei Rou sneered, "The problem now isn't whether Gunan is dead or not, but why did Lord Yu make a move against him?" Once this statement was out, Li Leo fell into silence. Even Elder Qin's expression didn't look good. Wei Rou's words were right on point. He and the others had come all the way here to find someone to support the organization, not a troublesome fellow. Moreover, the problems on his body might affect the Alliance, so they had to be careful. "I've already sent the news back to the organization and let the two commanders make the decision," Elder Qin said. "Investigate clearly why Lord Yu attacked first." It had to be said that Elder Qin still had a sliver of hope in his heart. He hoped that this was just Yu Qinling's personal behavior. He had seen Gunan's power and knew that once the latter entered the organization, he would be second only to the two commanders. Wouldn't such a big shot need to have a few confidants in the organization? As the first person to come into contact with the other party, Elder Qin had long set his sights on that spot. But now, at that moment, a crystal on Elder Qin's body suddenly lit up. He jumped into the air and a phantom image appeared. The shadow was wearing a mask and had a slender figure. There was also a silver-colored sword at her waist. "Greetings, Second Commander." Elder Qin and the other two greeted at the same time. The shadow nodded lightly, then said in a cold female voice, "Immediately stop all cooperation with Gunan and return to the organization." Upon hearing this, Elder Qin frowned slightly while Wei Rou was overjoyed. "Second Commander." Elder Qin tried to speak, but before he could finish his sentence, he was interrupted. "A real big shot in the Alliance has made a move. This matter is not something we can interfere with. Return immediately," the second commander said quickly. After saying that, the shadow dissipated and did not give Elder Qin a chance to continue asking questions. And he really had nothing to ask now. He just muttered, "The real big shots." A moment later, Elder Qin sighed softly and said, "Wei Rou, contact Third Last and ask her to bring people over immediately. We'll only wait for her for an hour." In Gunan's residence, Lin Yunyun was sitting in front of Third Last with a hesitant expression on her face. Third Last was still trying to persuade her. "Yunyun, he hasn't appeared for a few days. No one knows if he's dead or alive now. Follow me, let's go to the White Mist. That's where we blood descendants should go," Third Last said. Lin Yunyun simply lowered her head and remained silent. She knew that Third Last was telling the truth. If she wanted to develop further, she would have to join the blood descendants. However, do you think that you can't be ungrateful because Gunan helped you awaken your bloodline? Third Last sneered after seeing through her thoughts. Lin Yun hesitated for a while before nodding gently. Idiot, what do you do to help him here? If someone can't even deal with him, you'll just be a burden if you stay. She paused for a while before continuing. You can only make good use of your power in the white mist and find a chance to take revenge for Gunnan in the future. Even though she said those words, she still didn't believe herself. Yu Qinling was the one who did it. No matter how talented Lin Yun was, how long would it take for her to reach that stage? By then, it was unknown if she would still remember Gunnan. She had done everything she could to kidnap Lin Yun because she wanted to find a helper for herself. By the time they reached the white mist, Lin Yun would have no one to rely on but herself. That would mean that her power would double, and many things would become easier. Lin Yun fell into deep thought again, and this time, she seemed to be in a dilemma. At this moment, third last communication device lit up. Her expression changed slightly. The people from the White Mist are about to leave 66 Amaterasu. It'll be too late if we wait any longer. Have you thought it through? With a choice in front of her, Lin Yun finally gritted her teeth and said, Okay, I'll go with you. A few moments later, the two figures quickly left Gunnan's residence, as if they were afraid that someone would suddenly return. However, a shadow had already stopped on the sofa in the house where they couldn't see. It then turned into Gunnan, who watched them leave through the window. A faint smile flashed across his face before he stopped smiling and lifted the sofa, revealing a small door on the ground. After opening the door, Lan Si's face was revealed. Seems like you're seriously injured. Lan Si sneered at Gunnan. How does it feel to be betrayed by your loved ones? People like you who only know about conspiracies and power will never be treated sincerely by others. Gunnan smiled and said, You're talking about the way people get along with each other, but it doesn't apply to me. Lan Si could not help but be slightly stunned. Before she could react to what Gunnan was saying, she saw that he had already taken out a blue round stone and placed it in front of her. It was the purpose of her and her brother's trip, which was to obtain the divine clear water stone for Goddess Nuwa. At this moment, 2 of the 3 holes on the divine clear water stone had already been filled, and the last one was on her. Lan Si suddenly felt cold sweat trickling down her back. She had no idea what Gunnan was going to do, but she knew that it wouldn't be anything good. Are you ready? I'm the first oracle in this world. Gunnan reached out and patted her face, while the power of shadow surged out and suppressed Lan Si's divine power. Chapter 98. In the early days of the game, when the players were still inexperienced, there had always been different opinions on how to use parangons. Some people wanted to swallow it directly, some wanted to use it to nurture their own god, and some wanted to use the godstone as bait, until a method to directly convert the godstone into sin points appeared. From then on, no one tried to stir up any more trouble. They would only praise him from the perspective of a latecomer. You're a F** king genius. It turned out that no matter how messy the gameplay was, it was still not as direct as the sin points. The divine stone slowly approached Lan Si. The green light was getting brighter and brighter, and the same light began to flash between Lan Si's eyebrows. That was the fragment of the divine stone that belonged to her. The godstone under Gunnan's control was much more powerful than Feng Luan's. In just a moment, Lan Si did not have the strength to resist at all. The fragment in her body had already completely separated and fused with the divine stone. Finally, the complete godstone seemed to have completely awakened at this moment. Under the faint light, mysterious patterns began to appear, instantly covering the surface. The godstone was blue and white in color, exuding an astonishing divine radiance. In front of the incomparably lofty power of the same origin, Lan Si almost gave birth to the idea of prostrating himself in worship. However, in the next moment, a smear of black began to appear on the godstone and rapidly spread throughout the entire godstone. The divine stone's originally supreme aura suddenly disappeared. Lan Si seemed to realize something and shouted, "Devil! You're the devil!" Lan Si had never seen a godstone before, but he knew that even a mutant god could not change the characteristics of a godhead, unless the other party was not a god at all. Only devils could do such a thing. They were basically tarnishing the godhood. Gunan was non-committal. In the background of the game, very few people knew about the existence of the evil gods. Even among the gods, there were a lot of people who were confused, let alone Lan Si, an oracle. However, what Gunan was doing now was indeed tarnishing a godhead, so it was no wonder that Lan Si would mistake it. The evil god was an existence opposed to the gods, and it was Gunan's instinct to defile the divine spark. He easily left his mark on the divine spark, and then pushed it back. That jet-black godhead once again appeared in front of Lan Si, startling the latter. "Can you feel it? This is power," Gunan said in a strange tone. "What you desire, what you're unwilling to accept, and what you've lost. Pick it up, and you'll be able to grasp everything." Gunan's voice seemed to have some kind of magical power. Lan Si began to unconsciously look at the Godstone. What appeared in her mind was the scene of the Godstone recognizing Feng Luan and her brother's determination to help him. She couldn't accept it. She couldn't accept that after serving the Mother Goddess for 20 years, she would end up as someone's slave, and that person was just lucky. Power. I want power. The Godstone and Lan Si were getting closer and closer until it completely fused into the space between her eyebrows. Gunan still had a faint smile on his face. He had never worried that Lan Si would not fall. Not to mention that there were loopholes in her faith. Even if she was a fanatic, he had a way to make her fall. The main point was that no one could resist the temptation of power. This was especially true for gods, emissaries. The power of the godhead was originally from the same source as them. As long as they accepted the Godstone, they would have the foundation to become a god. The stronger the gods' emissaries' worship of the god's power, the more likely it was that they would fall. Unfortunately, this power had been infected by the evil god. When the god's emissary woke up again, it would be too late. After an unknown amount of time, Lan Si opened her eyes again. She didn't care that Gunan was still standing in front of her. She reached out a hand with some joy, and there was a blue light shining on it. This was a different divine power from the god of flowers. It came from this Godstone, and it belonged to Lan Si, and it also belonged to someone else. Gunan's thoughts moved slightly, and Lan Si felt that the circulation of divine power in her body suddenly stopped. The godhead in her mind no longer swallowed any divine power. "You?" Lan Si immediately realized that it was Gunan's action. She glared at Gunan, but all she got in return was a cold look. "You can't turn back anymore," Gunan said calmly. "Either you take this power and become my apostle, or you go back to Lorenza's god's kingdom and be burned as a heretic." Lan Si lowered her head in a daze. Looking at her hands that were filled with strange power, she almost wanted to cry. "Mother Goddess above, I couldn't resist the temptation." Gunan's figure was already far away, leaving her alone in the room. Gunan sat in the living room, waiting for the good news. He believed that Lan Si would not let him down. His eyes stopped on the sin value. The number had jumped from 130 to 176. This was the credit of Lan Si's fusion with the Godhead. It was very simple for players to convert Godstones into sin value. According to the principle of blasphemy is sin, players only needed to find a way to let a person who didn't believe in the gods absorb and convert the Godhead. This process would provide sin value. Of course, players had to infect this Godhead before they could be recognized by the rules. The next moment, the number of sin value jumped again, reaching 196 points. Then it began to rise slowly. 200, 210, 220. It was not until 252 points that Gunan's sin value stopped rising, but it was enough to surprise him. The increase of 122 points was almost the total amount of sin value he had obtained before. After all, this was something for a grade 5 player. Even if it was the lowest grade of Godstone, the income was enough to make Gunan rich overnight. Moreover, Gunan knew that this was far from the limit. It could only be said that Lan Si could only accept this much divine power. As her power grew, the Godhead of blasphemy would become more complete, and it would continue to provide sin value. What a pity. If I'm able to attain 300 points and awaken the profundity of shadow energy. Gunan sighed with dissatisfaction. Not only would my injuries recover swiftly, my strength would be able to improve by leaps and bounds. 300 points of sin value would be equivalent to the level of Wei Dong Hai and Yu Qinling. With Gunan's means, once he reached that level, he would naturally be invincible in the same level. Even if he encountered a grade 4 god, he would not be completely helpless. Just as Gunan was thinking about how to help Lan Si increase her strength, Lan Si had already walked out of the room. At this moment, her appearance was very different from before. Her blue hair had become pitch black, and even her pupils had become black with a hint of purple. Although her appearance had not changed, her entire temperament was demonic and had a different kind of charm. She looked at Gunan sitting quietly at the side and slowly walked up. She bit her lips and said, "Lan Si greets my lord." Gunan smiled silently. Just as he was about to speak, a message suddenly came from the evil god's temple in his mind. Sin event. Lan Si's fall has been completed. Total obtained sin value, 50 points. Chapter 99. When he saw the first message, Gunan was pleasantly surprised, as if he had forgotten about this. When he saw the second message, he was dumbfounded. Crime events only rewarded sin points. This was the game's rule. Wait, wasn't this a special reward for a chain event? Chain events were extremely rare. Even in his previous life, Gunan had only encountered it a few times. Most of them ended after 2 or 3 rounds, and the rewards were just SOSO. At least, Gunan had never seen a special reward after completing a mission. In the past, he only used it as a special benefit. He didn't expect that this chain event would give him 1,600 points. For a grade 3 player, this wasn't a big number. Even when Gunan slacked off to complete the Immortal and Demon World mission, he still got 1,000 points. 1,600 points weren't enough at all. But in any case, these points came at the right time. Gunan didn't even bother to pay attention to Lan Si. His consciousness sank into the evil god's temple and began a wave of upgrades and purchases. Upgrading the core skill Shadow Power to level 3 cost 500 points. Upgrading Passivation to level 3 cost 400 points. Purchasing Flash Strike and Judgment of Justice cost another 600 points. After such a wave of purchases, Gunan's original 1,700 points were instantly reduced to 200 points. Fortunately, the skills were automatically unlocked. Otherwise, he wouldn't have enough money to purchase the skills. But these points were definitely worth it. The Shadow Power at the level of Profound already had the overbearing power of the Law of Light. And the level 3 Passivation skill reduced the damage by a terrifying 80%. If Gunan took another attack from the Deep Sea King, he wouldn't end up like this again. As for the 2 skills, Flash Strike and Judgment of Justice, they were the skills that Gunan was prepared to choose. Flash Strike. As far as the eye can see, you can jump to the back of the target and attack. Judgment of Justice. In the name of justice, deal true damage based on the life lost to the target. Flash Strike was the ultimate guarantee of the evil god's activity. It could be used to bypass all obstacles and was equivalent to a specific teleportation skill. Unless the space was sealed, no one could catch Gunan. Judgment of Justice belonged to the Kill series. This was a rather vulgar name and a skill that did not match the name of the evil god at all, but its effects were surprisingly good. The true damage beheading effect meant that no matter how powerful the boss was, once it entered a critical state, it could be killed by Gunan in one strike. Although the players in the game were evil gods, they had nothing to do with the light and dark attributes. Many of their equipment and skills were the Holy Light series, such as Gunan's Dawn Sage Robe. Justice Judgment, the skill that was nicknamed the Great Sword, was the same. In the eyes of the game officials, an evil god's righteous declaration of justice was no less effective than a wanton massacre. When Gunan returned to reality, he could clearly feel that his body had been strengthened once again. His original injuries were also rapidly recovering, and the suppression of the Deep Sea King's nomological laws had weakened significantly. But in Lan Si's eyes, Gunan merely closed and opened his eyes, and his entire person's temperament changed greatly. Gunan, who had already given her a lot of pressure, seemed to have become even more unfathomable. "Sir," Wansi called softly. She was still not used to seeing Gu Nan as a father god. In reality, the relationship between the evil god's oracles was also different from that of a normal god. Gu Nan felt the power in his body still slowly increasing, and the corner of his mouth began to curve into a faint smile. "Quickly master your power. This time, follow me first." Where are we going?" "To get back at them." Most players were vengeful, especially when an NPC caused a bad gaming experience. It was normal for them to wait until they could free up their hands to kill the other party's entire family. And even among the players, Gu Nan was the type who held a high grudge. The people from the White Mist could not catch up to them for the time being. Moreover, their organization was there, so the monk could run, but the temple could not. Therefore, his first target was the Bloodline Alliance. Ever since Yu Qianling appeared, his general whereabouts were no longer a mystery. After all, a person living in the world would have to stay somewhere, unless he lived alone in the deep mountains. Yu Qianling had already stayed in 66 Amaterasu for a long time. Interestingly, he was actually not in the gathering place of the Bloodline Alliance, but in a school. Starry School in the capital district of 66 Amaterasu was the name of the school that Yu Qianling was in. This former genius of the Bloodline Alliance, who was now a top expert, had actually disguised himself as an ordinary teacher and taught in this starry school. Moreover, no one had found out for many years. If he had not been entrusted to act this time, no one would have found out. Today happened to be in the afternoon, the time when Starry School was bleeding. Students continuously walked out of the school. "Hey, I heard that someone came to visit Mr. Yu during your classes today." "Yes. Many people have come to see Mr. Yu these few days. All of them seem very powerful, but they are very polite to Mr. Yu. My dad said that your Mr. Yu is also a powerful person." Such conversations occurred among many students. Yu Qianling's identity was constantly being spread. Although no one had a clear understanding of him, the fact that he was a very powerful person had already been proven. Yu Qianling listened to the discussions of his colleagues and opened the door of the teacher's dormitory indifferently. He walked in slowly, but he was muttering softly. "How troublesome. Seems like this identity has to be changed again. I've used it for so many years, I really can't bear to part with it." Halfway through his sentence, he suddenly could not continue. This was because he saw a person who would definitely not appear in his room. Gu Nan was sitting quietly in front of him with Lan Si, looking at him expressionlessly. Yu Qianling looked at the other party in shock. He could not understand it all. This person had clearly taken a blow from the Deep Sea King. His injuries would probably not be lighter than Qin Xuanji's. Why was he here? Moreover, why did he not notice him entering his room? Yu Qianling only felt a chill. He turned around and wanted to put some distance between them, but Gu Nan appeared beside him in an instant and punched him directly. Flash attack. Yu Qianling's eyes were slightly cold. He knew that his strongest move was useless against Gu Nan, so he simply waved his hand and used a moon slash. The other party's strength was definitely not as good as his, and he was also injured. Bang! The moon slash was directly destroyed by Gu Nan. The shadow force flickered and crushed the moon rule. Then, he punched Yu Qianling's abdomen. Yu Qianling only felt a sharp pain as he was sent flying. However, what shocked him the most was the huge and terrifying aura on Gu Nan's body. There was also the rule power on his fist. That's profound level power. Yu Qianling screamed in his heart. Was there really a person who could suddenly explode with power after taking a world-breaking strike? Regardless of whether he believed it or not, Gu Nan had already grabbed him and looked down at him. Chapter 100. In the teacher's dormitory, Gu Nan held Yu Qianling's hair with one hand and stared at him coldly. The next moment, a dazzling silver moonlight erupted. Yu Qianling's entire body turned into a crescent moon and escaped from Gu Nan's grasp. He stood at the side and sneered at him. "Junior, do you really think bang?" Gu Nan's figure suddenly appeared behind him and punched the back of his head. Yu Qianling staggered from the impact. That terrifying force caused his vision to darken. Gu Nan's subsequent punches and kicks made him even more miserable. He was a great master at the profound meaning stage, but now he was like a sandbag, being punched and kicked by Gu Nan. After suffering a few punches, Yu Qinling finally flew into a rage. With a roar, he transformed into a silver-white moon fox. As a bloodline carrier, almost all had such a transformation ability. After transforming into their bloodline, their strength would increase significantly. At least, Gunan could clearly feel that the power of the silver moon around him had increased. Yu Qianling covered his entire body with the power of the moon, gradually filling the entire dormitory. Lan Si, who was beside him, even found it difficult to move. This was a very smart move. He could tell that Gu Nan was relying on his powerful physical strength. In such an environment, the other party would not be able to get close to him quickly. If Gu Nan used nomological power, then his law reflection technique would come in handy. He was indeed someone who had dominated the universe 20 years ago. From a tactical point of view, he did not make any mistakes. Unfortunately, Gunan had just obtained 2 new skills. Flash Strike. Gunan's figure cut through the void. The moonlight on the ground could not stop him at all. He appeared behind Yu Qianling again and punched again. Gunan used all his strength in this punch. He even used the Dragon Heart Pendant, which he had not used for a long time, just to hurt his enemy. Crack! Most of Yu Qianling's strength was spread out. He could not react in time and was hit in the spine. The crisp sound of bones breaking rang out, and the moon fox cried out in pain before falling to the ground. Gunan! Yu Qianling knew that he had been completely defeated. He immediately shouted, "If you want to find Qin Xuanji, I'll bring you there. If you kill me, you'll become the enemy of the entire alliance." Gunan's movements slowed down as he chuckled. "Do you know where she is?" "Of course." Before Yu Qianling could finish speaking, Gunan punched him again, knocking him out. The commotion in the teacher's dormitory was like a bright light in the dark of the academy. Who's inside? A few teachers who happened to pass by the dormitory door immediately sensed that something was wrong and shouted at them. Lan Si's figure appeared at the door and said in a cold voice, "Mind your own business. All of you scram." Those people's faces immediately darkened, and one of them was even angered. "Who are you? Who gave you the guts to cause trouble in Starry School?" Lan Si glared and wanted to say something, but Gunan had already walked out with the moon fox. He did not even look at them. With a wave of his hand, 3 shadow swords shot out, piercing through the throats of those people. "Let's go." Gunan's expression did not change at all until the corpses fell to the ground. He held Yu Qianling's body with one hand and said to Lan Si casually. Lan Si stared ahead blankly, unable to adapt to Gunan's style. After a while, he hurriedly followed. Half an hour later, near a hidden villa area in 66 Amaterasu, a figure approached. A few patrolmen immediately walked over. "Who is it?" It's Lord Yu." One of them was about to ask, but he suddenly recognized the other person and his expression turned strange. Yu Qianling's face was already swollen. The mask could barely cover his face, and he did not look like himself at all. Yu Qianling asked with a dark expression, "Where is Wang Chun?" The patrolmen looked at each other. The Wang Chun that Yu Qianling mentioned was a lord-level cultivator permanently stationed in this branch of the Bloodline Alliance. How would they know his exact whereabouts? Yu Qianling seemed to know that he was asking in vain. He simply ignored them and disappeared quickly. After a while, in a house deep in the villa area, a bald middle-aged man was hugging 2 young girls in each arm and laughing heartily. He was teasing his 2 concubines when his expression suddenly changed, and he quickly hid to the side. Immediately after, a moonlight fell and cut the sofa he was sitting on into 2. The 2 girls could not laugh anymore. If the bald man had been 1 step slower, they would have ended up like the sofa. "Lord, you have to help us," one of them said tearfully. Scram. Unexpectedly, the bald man pushed her away with a dark expression and stared in a certain direction. "Yu Qianling, what do you mean by this? You still dare to ask me what I mean?" Yu Qianling walked in through the window with a similarly cold expression. The bald man was Wang Chun. When he saw Yu Qianling's current appearance, the corners of his mouth twitched. He could not think of anyone who could beat the other party up like this. Even if it was him, he went most beyond par with Yu Qianling. "Your face, Gunan." Yu Qianling spat out a name coldly. Yu Qin coldly spat out a name. He's not the youngest eternal domain realm cultivator in the Star Ocean, but the youngest Dao master in the entire Star Ocean. He is now at the entrance of branch. Do as you see fit. Wang Chun took a long time to digest the meaning of Yu Qianling's words. He could not help but gasp. He lowered his head and pondered for a moment. He immediately waved his 2 concubines away and pulled Yu Qianling to sit down with a smile. Old Yu, I was muddle-headed this time and believed Qin Xuanji's words. Tell me, what exactly is going on? Outside the villa area, Gunan was sitting leisurely by a lake, looking at the scenery of the lake and mountains. Lan Si stood behind him and asked hesitantly, Sir, if we let Yu Qianling go just like that, wouldn't we be releasing a tiger back in the mountains? Gunan waved his hand and said, He's just a small fry. When you master more divine power, you can easily deal with him. As he said this, Gunan was looking at his sin value. After breaking through to 302 points due to the serial incidents, there was no more movement. Obviously, Lan Si did not improve during this period. Lan Si nodded vigorously. As if suddenly remembering something, Gunan asked, There's something I've always forgotten to ask you. Where's Lorenza's God Nation? What does it have to do with this world? Faced with this question, Lan Si did not hesitate and directly told him everything she knew. However, what she knew set off a huge wave in Gunan's heart. Chapter 101. More than once, Gunan wondered how this world was related to the game in his previous life. Did the things in the game also exist here? Was it a parallel world or another era in the game world? Until the appearance of Lan Si and her sister, he confirmed one thing. At least the god of flowers, Lorenza, was alive and well in this world. Lan Si's description made Gunan truly understand what kind of existence this world was. The world that Lan Si originally lived in was called the World of Gods. The background was similar to the game in Gunan's previous life, but not completely the same. It was completely made up of the God's Kingdom and a main world. Gunan was now in a place called the World of Gods. This place was made up of 36 main skies and 72 boundary worlds. 36 main skies, 72 boundary worlds. Master of stars, master of the astral world. So this is what it means. When the 2 worlds were placed in front of Gunan, many details of the past appeared in his mind. According to the division of this world, above the break realm was the Master of Stars. Gunan originally thought that the Master of Stars was only grade 5, and the power level here should be far inferior to the game in his previous life. But according to Lan Si, the true masters of the world of gods were not inferior to the gods at all. There were even existences comparable to the master gods. What do the master gods mean? Only those above grade 11 were qualified to be called master gods. Existences like the Lord of Holy Light and the King of Darkness and Destruction were only grade 15. In the game, there was no existence above grade 15 at all. In other words, in Gunan's previous life, he used up the entire world sin value to rush to the 3rd transformation of grade 16. Unfortunately, he had just completed his 3rd transformation and transmigrated to this world, starting to build a God's Kingdom at grade 5. When the God's Kingdom is completed and the divine fire is ignited, wouldn't it be the master of a world? Gunan chuckled. Only now did he understand the meaning of the word Master of Stars. The real Master of Stars corresponded to the gods in his previous life. Gunan suddenly felt a little lucky. If it wasn't for Lan Si's appearance and his sudden question, he would probably have to advance to grade 5 to see the essence of the world. The game world from my previous life did exist. So, did my transmigration foretell something? Gunan rubbed his chin and looked at the mountain peak in the distance. No one knew what he was thinking. That's how it is. I can clearly tell you that even if the 2 of us join forces, we might not be able to suppress him. Yu Qianling laid out the ins and outs of the entire matter in front of Wang Chun. Then, he sneered as he looked at Wang Chun, who was at a loss and scratching his head. He was so anxious that his hair almost turned white. Wang Chun was really a loss now. If he had known this would happen, he would never have agreed to Qin Xuanji's terms and asked Yu Qianling to help him deal with Gunan. It was impossible for Qin Xuanji to tell everyone who was behind her, so her identity to the public was just a member of the alliance from the six-star region. What's more, Gu Nin is alone. We have a big family and a big business, so we can't play with him all the time. Wang Chun kept muttering. It seemed that he was trying to find some reasons for himself, but it also seemed that he was saying it to Yu Qianling. But when he finished speaking, he didn't hear Yu Qianling say anything else. He could only say, the only thing we can do now is to hand over Qin Xuanji. She's just an ordinary member. Qin Xuanji was seriously injured by Gu Nan previously and naturally had to return to the Alliance branch to heal. Now she was staying in the villa area. Yu Qianling still didn't say anything and only sneered. He had seen the Deep Sea King's virtual image in action and knew that Qin Xuanji had a backer, so he didn't say anything at this time. Wang Chan was now in trouble on both sides. No matter which side he jumped in, the result would not be good. But Yu Qianling had no obligation to remind him. Yu Qianling's silence made Wang Chen hesitate. He asked tentatively, by the way, could it be that Gunin used some kind of secret method and is actually not that strong? You can try, Yu Qianling said disdainfully. Wang Chan was about to say something when he felt a terrifying aura descend, followed by a loud bang. He quickly ran to the window. He saw a figure floating in the air, and a giant sword over 100 meters long was slashed down by him. Just this blow alone killed at least dozens of people in the villa area. Get Qin Xuanji out, or I'll slaughter everyone here. Gunan's cold voice came. Wang Chun didn't have time to think anymore and directly rushed to the door. He wanted to tie up Qin Xuanji and send her over as soon as possible, before more people died. After all, he was still too slow. Or rather, when someone came knocking on his door like this, as long as he had the guts, he wouldn't sit idly by. Just like that, Gunan stood in the void. Immediately, several figures appeared. They were led by 3 men and a woman, and all of them looked angry. One of the old men was so angry that his white hair stood up. He said angrily, "How dare you? I've lived for hundreds of years, but this is the first time I've heard that someone wants to slaughter the Bloodline Alliance." Swoosh! The dark sword light flashed and directly cut the old man in half. His upper body was cut from the right shoulder to the left waist. The cut was extremely smooth, and it slowly slid down. Half of the old man's body fell down, and Gunan's figure was revealed behind him, holding a sword with one hand, with a sneer on his face. These people were at most in the nuance realm. With Gunan's current strength, he didn't even need to use the blood saber. Just the shadow sword was enough to kill them instantly. The remaining people were shocked and angry. When they were about to attack with all their strength, they were stopped by a voice. "Everyone, please wait." A female voice came from afar. It was a woman who quickly rushed over and landed between Gunan and the people of the branch. This woman's dressing was very similar to that of the old 3 last, but her temperament was completely different. She gave off a very seductive feeling, which was fatal to men. As soon as the woman arrived, she bowed to Gu Nan respectfully and said, "Please show mercy, Mr. Gu. The minister has already gone to capture Qin Xuanji. I'll hand her over to you later." Her words made the rest of the branch members' expressions change. "Madam Sixtails, he just killed old Master Zhao." Sixtails turned around with a sullen expression and said, "Mr. Gu is a distinguished guest of the Alliance. What happened to old Master Zhao was just a misunderstanding. If you have anything to say, talk to Minister Wang." Everyone dared not speak up after being mentioned as the minister, and all of them were flushed with anger. Sixtails pursed her lips in disdain and turned to look at Gunan with a sweet smile. "Mr. Gu, why don't you follow me downstairs to rest first?" Gunan was still holding his sword, but the sneer on his face became even more pronounced. At the next moment, the sword light flashed again, and the dark tip of the sword pierced through Sixtails' chest, instantly ending her life. Sixtails looked at Gu Nan in disbelief. She could no longer speak due to the severe loss of blood, but she could not figure out why Gu Nan would attack. Chapter 102. Blood splattered in the sky. Gu Nan stood alone in the void with a sword, a drop of blood dripping from the tip of his sword. Sixtails lost her support and instantly fell from the sky, revealing the horrified faces of the people behind her. "You?" Someone pointed at Gunan with a trembling finger, but he couldn't utter a complete sentence. Gunan didn't intend to let them speak. He instantly pounced at them, and with his amazing strength and speed, he could kill them one by one with his sword. Whoosh! Another refinement realm expert was cut in half. The people of the Bloodline Division finally lost the will to fight back and instantly scattered. No matter how much they served the Alliance, they couldn't risk their lives. Unfortunately, how could they keep up with Gunan's speed? The skill Flash Strike was almost prepared for chasing and killing. As far as the eyes could see, Gunan's figure was changing every second, constantly appearing behind the people, and every time he swung his sword, he would take a life. In just a few blinks of an eye, he had slaughtered all the bloodline descendants who dared to stand out, leaving only a petite girl. Don't kill me." The girl was already crying and begging for mercy as Gu-Nin approached her. She was an extraordinaire who had just advanced and happened to run into some people who came to make trouble, so she rushed out with her seniors. Gu-Nin was still expressionless, and the sword in his hand was already in front of the girl, but in the next moment, he slightly paused. The girl noticed this pause and looked up in shock, only to see that Gu-Nin's figure was slightly blurred, and his body was gradually turning pitch black. Even his face was swallowed by the blackness that came out of his body. He instantly turned into a pitch-black human figure, and then, under the girl's shocked gaze, the sword in his hand continued to move forward. Puff! Blood splattered everywhere. On the other side, Wang Chun pushed the door open, and Qin Xuanji was sitting peacefully in the room, looking at him with a faint smile. Seeing that Qin Xuanji was still here, Wang Chun seemed to be relieved. Then he said with a straight face, "Miss Qin, it's good that you're still here. Please come with me." Qin Xuanji just looked at him coldly and said disdainfully, "Minister Wang, are you going to hand me over to Gunan? So what if I am?" Wang Chun said righteously, "You've made such a formidable enemy for the Alliance. What else do you have to say?" Qin Xuanji was slightly stunned. She immediately realized that Yu Qianling probably did not reveal anything about the King of the Deep Sea. Otherwise, no matter how stupid Wang Qin was, he would not go against that person. She then revealed a cold smile. Naturally, she would not be kind enough to remind him. Moreover, "Do you really think that Gunan is going to let you go?" Qin Xuanji said, looking at Wang Chun as if he was a fool. Her cold words startled Wang Chun. He finally regained some of his usual rationality, and the uneasiness in his heart began to grow stronger. In the next moment, a black shadow appeared behind him. "Who?" Wang Chun instantly turned around and shouted angrily. But what he saw was an extremely strange scene. It was a figure wielding a sword. His appearance was exactly the same as Gunan's, but even his body and sword were pitch black. This was truly a dark shadow. The black shadow directly slashed down at an amazing speed. Fortunately, Wang Chun was not sneak attacked, so he could hastily draw his saber to fight and was directly knocked aside by the sword. The black shadow was also knocked back, but he slowly walked over, and in the process, the blackness on his body began to fade little by little. When the blackness completely dissipated, the original body of Gu-Nan was revealed. This! Wang Chun looked at him as if he had seen a ghost, and then he could not help but look out of the window. In his perception, Gunan had been outside all the time. How could it be? Qin Xuanji looked solemn. Her reaction was faster than Wang Chen's, and she had already looked out of the window. The substitution of the original body and the clone, the exclusive rule. Is this the power you have after breaking through? She could clearly see that Gunan's body had turned into a ball of darkness. He had even killed the last girl with a single slash of his sword. Wang Chun now understood what had happened, and his heart was cold. Only people who had reached their level understood what it meant for Gunan to be able to do this. It meant that he had initially created his own rule, and it was a sign that he had 1 foot in the Break World level. Level 4, or the Break World level, was essentially a deep understanding and development of the original God power. The cultivator created his own rule on the basis of the God power. From this point of view, Yu Qianling's level was indeed very high. His reflection rule was almost at the level of level 4. He just needed to accumulate more experience. When Gunan reached 300 sin points, he opened up the Shadow Esoteric Substitution, which was also comparable to a normal level 4 rule. The core skill of the Shadow power, as the level increased, would open up 3 abilities: Hidden Shadow, Shadow Body, and Shadow Area. These 3 abilities were actually not weak, but the opponents that Gunan had encountered had never forced him to use the Shadow Body. It was only when the profound meaning of shadow, displacement, was activated that the domineering nature of this ability was revealed. The existence of the Shadow Body was to allow Gunan to freely switch between the original body and the clone. Gunan's gaze fell on the faces of the 2 people, and he wore a faint smile on his face. From the very beginning, he had made up his mind to kill the entire division of the Bloodkin, and he wanted to find Qin Xuanji. That was why he let you, Qianling, return, but secretly followed him with a clone. After he met Wang Chun, the clone followed Wang Chun to this place. Mr. Gu, Wang Chun's strength was not as good as you Qianling's. After many years of guarding the 66 Amaterasu, his strong heart had long been worn away, and he wanted to beg for mercy. But Gunan did not give him a chance. With a flash of the blood-red blade, this dignified Downlord powerhouse's head fell to the ground. At the same time, a bloody mark appeared on Gunan's neck. In order to ensure a one-hit kill, he specially switched to the Bloody King's blade. Of course, with Gunan's current strength and the terrifying effect of the level 3 blunting effect, the effect of the Bloody Curse was almost negligible. The injuries from killing Wang Chun were healed in the blink of an eye. Qin Xuanji looked on coldly from the side. The battle cries outside the window continued. That was Gunan's clone following his will and loyally carrying out the order to kill the entire division. I didn't expect that you would really dare to come here, Qin Xuanji said to Gunan, her face still calm and indifferent. You know that there's a big shot behind me. As she spoke, a light gradually appeared under her feet. A formation that had been inscribed long ago revealed itself. It was the same formation that Qin Xuanji had set up previously. It was a formation to summon the 4th Order powerhouse, the King of the Deep Sea. This formation could not be moved, and it could only be used for a moment. Qin Xuanji originally thought that it would not be of use, but she also did not expect that Gunan would be so daring as to directly kill his way into the Bloodline Alliance's division. She stared coldly at Gunan. Since you're courting death, before she could finish her words, she saw Gunan slash the ground with his blade. A terrifying shadow power instantly gushed out and directly smashed the formation into pieces. Chapter 103. Qin Xuanji was dead. Her death was no different from that of any other NPC. Gunan ended her life with a single slash. That was all. An NPC he had known for a long time had been killed by his own hands. Gunan didn't feel much about it. He had seen too many NPCs betray NPCs. He didn't have any extra emotions. Qin Xuanji was no longer of any value to Gunan. Leaving her alive would only make her a target for some big shot who could attack him at any time. Naturally, she could only die. Are you sure no one escaped? Gunan asked indifferently as he stood outside the villa. Lan Si hurriedly replied, Yes, my lord, a small number of people who wanted to escape were also killed by your doppelgangers. Lan Si was indescribably frightened as she said this. It wasn't that she hadn't seen doppelgangers before. However, Gunan's shadow body could split into 2, then into 4. In the end, she couldn't even count how many doppelgangers there were. Soon, she could see that the power of those doppelgangers weakened as they split. They were perfect for slaughtering weak enemies. Gunan naturally knew what she was thinking, but he only nodded lightly and didn't say anything. As his strength increased day by day, his methods became more and more varied. It wasn't strange for him to be able to do this. Slaughtering the bloodline branch here is enough to temporarily cut off that big shot's control over this place. Gunan took one last look at the villa area and threw down a torch. Boundless flames suddenly rose. The ruins and broken limbs were all engulfed in a sea of fire. Let's go. We should go to the next map. Where? The 6-star region. the immortal and demon world. Killing and the flames of war were still the main theme here. Gunyan stood on the tall city tower and looked down at the city that belonged to care for one's family. She felt a rare sense of satisfaction in her heart. She didn't know when it started, but she started to like the feeling of looking down at the whole city. It was probably because care for one's family had invested so much effort here that even she couldn't escape its influence. She had reincarnated in many planes, but it was rare to see a plane that was rich in resources and had a complete power system like this one. Even though they had yet to truly conquer this plane, care for one's family had benefited greatly from their gains during this period of time. I really have to thank that guy. Gunyan's lips curled into a sarcastic smile. He didn't know if he was laughing at someone's generosity or at the impermanence of the world. She recalled what the other party had said before he left, and she couldn't help but feel a little angry. If it wasn't for him deliberately stirring up trouble, he wouldn't have made a move on Yin Xiao Xiao. Who would have thought that a native girl like her would actually be so strong? That strange law was almost on par with his own. Even thinking about it now, Gunyan could not find a good way to deal with it. But no matter what you do, this place still belongs to me. Gunyan felt the mountain breeze blowing on his face as he softly muttered to himself. Eldest Mississippi, a figure appeared behind her and bowed as he reported. There's news from 66 Amaterasu. A villa district has been completely massacred. It's suspected to be a branch of the Bloodline Alliance. Gunyan raised his eyebrows and said, Bloodline Alliance? The family suspects that Gunyan did it? Do you have any evidence? Gunyan's question came very quickly, causing the figure to stammer for a moment. This no, but Yu Qianlong, who attacked just now, is a top-notch bloodline warrior. Hearing this, Gunyan's eyes narrowed slightly. She placed one hand on the city wall and lightly knocked on it. Even though she was in the immortal demonic plane, she still paid attention to 66 Amaterasu. Or rather, she was paying attention to Gunyan's every move. She always felt that Gunyan was a very strange person. He seemed to have a very strong purpose, but those purposes came without reason, making it hard for people to understand. Whether it was in a red carp or African 66 Amaterasu, it was the same. After a moment of contemplation, she said again, continue to keep an eye on 66 Amaterasu. At the same time, send some people to the 6-star region. I have a feeling that the White Mist organization is going to be in trouble. After saying this, she waved her hand to dismiss the figure, but gently hugged a young girl beside her. If there's danger on the White Mist side, find a chance to hide here, understand? Okay. The young girl's face showed some shyness, but she nodded firmly. It was Lin Yunyan. Dear passengers, Starship X-5698 to the 6-star region is about to depart. Passengers who haven't boarded the ship yet, please hurry up. The female announcer's gentle but urgent voice echoed continuously in the hall, urging the passengers to board the ship as soon as possible. Among the hurried passengers, a young girl turned around and shouted, Brother, hurry up, it's almost time to board the ship. Behind her, there was a white-clothed young man yawning as he walked over unhurriedly. His expression simply caused the spectators to feel anxious. The young girl stomped her feet anxiously, but the young man just walked on. It took him a lot of effort to catch up at the last moment, and he was finally not stopped at the ticket checkpoint. The young girl rolled her eyes in annoyance. At this moment, she could not be bothered to say anything, and simply pulled the young man forward quickly. The two of them were Gunyan and Lan Si. Ever since the massacre at the Bloodline branch, Gunyan had put an end to the matters of 66 Amaterasu and began to head to the 6-star region. He did not forget that the White Mist organization stood him up and that the Three Tails had even brought Lin Yunyan there. Well, the key was still to obtain the method of reincarnation mission. If not for that, he could not be bothered with the Three Tails or Lin Yunyan. He would just let them die. Anyway, he had already collected all his sin points. However, since he was going there, he naturally had to get back at them. Being taken advantage of by an NPC was not something a professional player would do. Gunyan did not know how much the big shot behind Qin Xuanji knew about him, so he did not use his original appearance and name. Instead, He pretended to be Lan Si's brother. After getting along with Gu Nan during this period of time, Lan Si could be considered to have seen Gu Nan's true colors clearly. This bastard was usually a nerd, whereas the ruthlessness and decisiveness he had when he was killing people. He would sleep until noon every day, and apart from eating, he would read some books and watch dramas. Training, learning, and a strict and self-disciplined lifestyle were all non-existent. Gunan did not want Lu's family to know about his current situation, so the preparations for the trip this time fell on Lan Si's shoulders. That made Lan Si, who was used to being a pampered missy, go crazy. However, she could not disobey Gunan's orders, so she had no choice but to bite the bullet and do the work of an assistant. Actually, Gunan could not be blamed for that. After all, he did not need to train to play games, and it was the same for him now. Apart from the fact that he knew how to kill people, he was indeed a nerd. Just as the two of them walked into the depths of the tunnel and were about to board the starship, a man and a woman were also staring at them from afar. "Cousin, that person looks like Lan Si," a young man who seemed to be only 15 or 16 years old said as he pointed to them. She dyed her hair black, and she looks even more beautiful," the cousin said as she looked at Gunan and stroked her chin. Chapter 104. The starship to the 6-star region departed. Gunan was like an ordinary traveler, quietly sitting in the starship's banquet hall, gazing at the stars outside. The starry sky of the starry sky realm was indeed a magnificent sight. It was something that was rarely seen in the other worlds of the myriad heavens. Ever since Lan Si fused with the God Stone, Gu Nan had become lazy. Now he could increase his sin points even if he lay down all day. He no longer cared about the rewards of the reincarnation mission. Working hard for a whole day might not even be as rewarding as sitting down for a day. In just a few days, his sin points had increased to 310 points, and this was the result of Lan Si's busy schedule and not having time to cultivate. Gunan's current goal was to go to the 6-star region, find the location of the White Mist organization, and obtain the method to translate the world will. Only by reading a large number of reincarnation missions and finding the ones with the highest rewards would it be worth Gunan's time to act. "Sir, are you Mr. Lan Ta?" A respectful voice sounded out by Gunan's ears, and he turned around in astonishment to see numerous attendants standing by his side. Gunan was currently using the identity of Lan Si's brother, Lan Ta. This identity might not be able to be hidden for long, but as long as the name Gu Nin did not appear in public, it would be enough for him to sneak into the 6-star region. Once he got there, he did not care if his identity was seen through. At the end of the day, he was not afraid of the rank 4 behind the bloodline carrier. He just needed the starship as a means of transportation. Unless the rank 4 came personally, Gu Nin did not even need to run. He would just crush his way through. He was almost invincible among the rank 3. "I am. What's the matter?" Hearing Gunan's affirmative answer, the attendant seemed to be relieved and hurriedly said, "Mr. Lan, your sister, Miss Lan Si, is in the 3rd hall. She seems to have met with some trouble." The starship that Gunan and Lan Si were on was a series of flights that only the upper class could afford, so there were not many passengers on board at once. The interior of the starship was also quite luxurious and rich. The 3rd side hall was not far from the main hall, and it was a room for entertainment. Lan Si had always been a playful and active person. Of course, she didn't have time to accompany Gu Nan to watch the stars, so she came here alone to have fun. But with her strength, she actually ran into trouble. Gunan frowned slightly. Since he had already boarded the starship, he did not have to worry too much. They could just kill all the passengers and force the captain to head to the 6-star region. However, after arriving here, he realized that things were not as he had imagined. Lan CK didn't look like she was being bullied. Instead, she glared at the group of people. Opposite her was a group of youths, all of whom were dressed luxuriously. One look was enough to tell that they were no ordinary disciples. Among the onlookers, a young man chuckled and muttered, "Cousin, her brother is here too. There's going to be a good show to watch." The girl he called cousin also smiled helplessly and said, "You little rascal, you only know how to play these kind of tricks all day long." Although she was complaining, There was a hint of schadenfreude in her tone. Their voices were very low, and they were mixed in the crowd's discussion. Even the people around them couldn't hear them clearly. However, with Gunan's physique, their conversation was no different from speaking directly into his ear. Gunan's slightly cold gaze swept across the crowd. Just as he was about to grab the two of them, his gaze paused for a moment on the girl. It wasn't because of her appearance or temperament, but because he knew her. Tang Xian, Gunan's old acquaintance from the Ming Lu. When Gunan first came to the astral realm, he was abducted to the Ming Lu, and it was Tang Xian who brought him into the organization. After that, Tang Xian was one of the main people in charge of the exploration mission of the immortal and demon world. After the mission was completed, Gunan left the Ming Lu, but he didn't see her again. He didn't expect to see her on this starship today. Did she also leave the Ming Lu, or did she follow the organization's request to head to the 6-star region? Gunan glanced at her. These thoughts flashed across his mind, but he put them aside and slowly walked forward. What's going on? He walked up to Lan Si and asked calmly. Lan Si was still staring at the people around her. She didn't know that Gunan had arrived. Hearing the voice, she was shocked and quickly turned around. Brother, why are you here? She didn't want to disturb Gunan, but she didn't expect that someone had already spread the news to him. Gunan didn't even need to think about it. It was obvious that Tang Xian's cousin had sent someone to inform him. Before Lan Si could speak, someone in the crowd heard what she said. Someone immediately said, "Hey, you're her brother, right? You came at the right time. Your sister didn't even give Miss Fu face. What do you have to say?" Gunan paid no attention to him at all. His gaze swept past them, and he noticed there was a young girl who was surrounded in the middle like a moon surrounded by stars. Obviously, it was Miss Fu. At this time, Lan Si was also narrating what had happened in a low voice. Speaking of which, it was a very simple matter. There was a poker game called 10,000 that was popular in the universe. Ever since Lan Si learned it, she had become an expert. This time, it was inevitable that she would come to play a few rounds. With her level, it was naturally easy for her to kill everyone. This made these young masters feel ashamed, so they thought of asking for help. That Miss Fu, unfortunately, she had something to do at the last minute. She didn't arrive until Lan Si was about to leave. Lan Si liked to play cards, but she was a very self-conscious person. She left as soon as she said she would. Why would she play another 2 rounds, just because the person who came was a big shot? I heard that she's the daughter of a Dao Master in the 6-star region. She's also a famous superstar in the universe. Lan Si described Miss Fu. The 6-star region had always adhered to the ancient tradition. Dojos of various sizes were established, often by the top experts in the eternal domain realm. The masters of these dojos were respectfully called Dao Masters. Over time, it even became a separate level, corresponding to the super experts who had comprehended their own nomological laws. According to Gunan's understanding, Dao Masters could be understood as the 3rd level of profundity. Some of them lived up to their name, such as Yu Qianling and Wei Donghai. Some were just there to make up the numbers, such as Wang Chun. As for this Miss Fu in front of him, Gunan really did know her. The universe was a semi-technological plane. All kinds of entertainment industries were quite developed. Singers and movie stars also had great influence. Miss Fu was one of the best. Her real name was Fu Jing. She was a big star who excelled in movies, TV, and music. Even in the 9-star region, her movies and songs could often be seen. Even though Gunan had never cared about these aspects, he would more or less stumble upon these pieces of information. Just as Gunan was recalling these pieces of information, Fu Jing also walked up and said, "We're not being aggressive. It's just that Miss Lan's superb card skills are really, let's go." Gunan didn't even look at her. He patted Lan Si's shoulder and turned around.